So for the recording's sake here, I'm just going to be calling this transmission 1. This is Tellez. This is May 30th, and it's approximately about 11:55 a.m. here, Pacific Standard Time. What was phase 1 of the unveiling, and what was part of that?
It's a good question. That's kind of like what I need to help because I don't know. Earlier, I was like perfectly in tune. As soon as I kind of started to organize this, I just went to haze.
Yeah, I
And
hear
it's
you.
not like anything is gone. It's that now, instead of like categories on a drop down menu, it's like everything's in a big tag cloud in my head and they're just like jumbling around. But so what I was informed of and what I've seen play out is that phase one of the unveiling is basically, however it's possible, getting the public aware of what's been going on in the secret projects, specifically, namely the underground bases, the basically the use of children as well as celebrities and all types of personnel beyond that for these secret projects, which go into many different areas. And ultimately, out of that is the disclosure and unveiling of the technology of cloning and the capabilities that they've come to thus far. And I'm assuming that's going to include, or at least include, the beginnings of brain chip integration, supercomputing, and transferred consciousness.
Okay, so can you talk to me more in depth about the secret projects here, the underground bases, and the what uses the children are serving right now?
Well, as far as the secret projects, they've gone on for a long time. There's been various kinds of secret projects, even back to ancient times or what we would consider that. So, where just the same types of results were looked for in ways that we wouldn't consider, what would be a public project today, what would be publicly acceptable. Around World War II, with Project Paperclip and all that, and the very high advances of mind control technology, methodology, and the combination of trauma-based mind control and monarch mind control, which are essentially the same things, into a form of basically militant like control systems that could be used for mass populations. And this has been going on forever. So there's projects that developed that to the highest degree, and then comes the advancements in technology that were related to World War II, essentially gravitic drive craft and zero point technology, zero point generators, which could pull energy from the subquantum fabric of space time, which is pretty much just a way of putting it because it's both more simple but more technical than that. It involves a lot of sacred geometry and the angles and designs of the generators and the electronic components. And then pretty much they say cloning as well goes back to ancient times, that they knew various things far, far long ago, but around the same projects, cloning was introduced. So you have basically mind control, very advanced technology, and cloning. And along with that, and again, back into ancient times this goes, was either the discovery or the decision to introduce some sort of control mechanism involving other races, whether they are physical, and regardless of the issues regarding the information on that at the moment, or whether they are in what we would call interdimensional and don't actually participate, if you will, in a physically limited form of reality, as well as the body itself. And yeah, so from there, a whole bunch of political changes. I don't know, the whole truth. Some say there was a political takeover of Earth by these factions, and then again, that was even, you can trace that to ancient times. But uh, So then, as far as, I mean, that's why the secret projects themselves is a very intense and it's a rich issue. In World War II, you could talk about the Philadelphia experiment and Rainbow and Phoenix, and it just goes on from there. It goes on to them find, everyone involved, from the Nazis to the American government to people that just had that knowledge before, finding what we would call stargates or wormholes on the planet and underground and in certain mountains and geologically, basically geometrically sound areas. They tend to produce these collections of energy, and then to the utilization of such wormholes and stargates, down to the finding of artifacts and technology that basically meshed with the mind and was far more advanced, and usually I think related to crystalline technology, whether it was even a form of metal that was aligned and structured like a crystal would be. And they can use various forms of substances, and I really don't understand that, because they're scalar wave devices, but the mind interfaces with them. So there's no buttons, there's no this, it's very strange. But then there's information encoded into it that the mind then picks up, and you can see things and know things. So they found a lot of technology as well. And then there are other projects involving going back to the mind control, if you want to call it that, systems in place to control the population. And then there's these projects that were carried out on the people, as far as public opinion control, coercion of certain groups, and infiltration, media control, and certain things that have to do with that. So those are the secret projects, the basis of them. There's a lot more than that. Each one, they figured something out, and it would break off into something else. And they always change the names and then just pack up their bags and go to another building and pretend it was over. And then the children are utilized for, you could call it two ways, both the good and the bad, even, just to bring duality into it, but it's all has to be learned before we can use words like that, and words like that don't even apply. That doesn't mean abusing children in the base is a good thing or not a bad thing. It just means that we need to learn about what's going on.
Yeah.
And so it was basically, that goes back to like occult purposes, where specific energy with the children. But then it also goes, and then, that's used in whatever purposes, possibly abusive purposes, and basically like kind of energy vampire purposes. And so then there are other reasons which relate basically to military and advancements and technology and operations. And it's that children were used for various operations and experiments because they had capabilities that adults usually lose by the time, I think it starts around 12, and then around 20, 25, most people lose the majority of their psychic abilities, at least previous times in history. Excuse me. Because now there are plenty of people who are, we can use words like they're asleep, they're unaware, blah, blah, blah. In reality, it's their psychic sense that is diminishing. But there's so many more people that are talking about these things and becoming more sensitive and more aware and benefiting general increases of self-awareness on the planet. If we're fully self-aware, we're not going to be disrupting harmony, because that's essentially what self-awareness is. When harmony is sustained, like a standing wave in the world, we wouldn't be participating in that. That only is a clear sign of lack of self-awareness. But because of a person's ability to, basically when we're born, we don't have the toxins, the programs, and I'm not sure really what else it is. Probably even the conscious, subconscious mind and the ego and the veils that are attached, it's probably not as strong. And so children were used and utilized both for, what we would call a bad reason with the abuse situation, but then what you could also call a good situation where they were basically trained and taught how to utilize certain technology. And from that, many forms of contact, travel, discernment, and like remote viewing, learning about the universe, and many things were found. And so the adults went around finding the artifacts, and then they used them as well. There was plenty of people who were, I'm sure, good at that, but children were brought in for that purpose, that their spiritual abilities, their psychic abilities, are much more intact and much stronger sometimes. And as well, you got to think about it. They're looking for people that are psychic and capable of doing these things. We're in the situation where psychic power diminishes. The more a person is introduced and sustaining their awareness off of the materialistic world. So they're going to have to find these people as children. Otherwise, they're going to turn into the adults that are more commonly, less psychic.
Now, is the less psychic part of adults, is this something that is part of a secret project, or is this a natural thing that's occurring because of the kind of co-creative experience that we're participating in?
I think it's a little of both.
Hmm.
And so, because I don't want to sit here and say it was a project to like dumb people down.
Okay.
Because from what I have seen, is that has happened, but the majority of, I don't know how to put it, of people involved in these projects are here to help wake people up. Now, does that indicate there was some type of infiltration, or maybe an infection, or some type of invasion, even, and takeover? Probably not, but possibly that there are other agendas within these projects, within their funding, within their power structure, that we're not entirely aware of, to the degree where some people would rather have the power option and route over endangering the entire society, just the entire structure, the entire world, basically by letting people know that these things are going on. The reality of life and death is far beyond what they're told. The reality of basically everything is far beyond, it's far worse and far better than anything they can imagine at this point.
Hmm.
So it's a control system, but the question is whether they're doing it to keep people asleep forever, or whether there's a plan to finally, help them out. And I'm not really one to decide, although there does seem to be a form of spiritual infection that's taking place, which is essentially when these control systems that were mechanized and basically introduced to artificial intelligence began making their own decisions.
Mm. Can you talk to me about the kids that they pick up in these programs early on because of psychic abilities? Do they retain those psychic abilities as they get older, or do they also lose those psychic abilities later on?
Um, it's all controlled for the most part, although usually people who are programmed or activated to keep their abilities, ultimately the programming will break
Hmm.
and the original personality and alignments come through. And so then the abilities come through. Um, During the time, say like earlier on, usually people, unless the person is fully involved in the projects to the degree where they're basically living there, usually the memory is wiped. And the ability to do that can be gained through trauma-based mind control, to the degree where certain programs now, certain words related to that trauma, which is related to the split in consciousness, can be, said and used to induce a state of unconsciousness or memory wiping. And then there's technology that can focus in now. That was the old stuff. Now there's technology that can pinpoint it on a hologram on a computer and basically damage the neurons.
And this
And
can happen in real time.
as far as what?
As far as pinpointing it on a computer and damaging neurons, this is something they can plug in as they're tracking along people, as they're monitoring people and handling people.
Well, it's real time, but I'm not sure how. Well, basically everything that's done, say 10 feet away from inside a base, or 10
Yeah,
feet
yeah.
away from the generator,
Uh-huh.
can be done while moving and
Gotcha.
out in public.
Gotcha.
It would probably most likely be done while the body is still and the person is asleep.
Hmm.
They'll be operated on basically in higher space using these waves and the technology And and after they're programmed, though, triggers can be given at any point to reactivate one aspect of the previous programming.
And how are these triggers transmitted?
Pretty much like you could expect from the media and certain things, which is basically it's any form of external stimulus or stimuli. So a word, something on TV, a video, if it's a person that's involved in political decisions or anything like that, there will often be a handler nearby, and that person, you'll see them warming somebody up, shaking their hand as they get ready to go out on the podium or whatever it is, and they'll whisper something into their ear, that's normal stuff to see. Well, that person could be activating this aspect of the programming at that point in time, and the person that's handled might not even recognize or know the difference and the change to the degree where they might, forget the speech or certain areas of their existence, their lives, their memories.
So these are sensory triggers through audio, through vocal, through eyesight, through even smell, I'm guessing, can happen?
Yeah, smell, I don't think, because I think I've asked the same question,
Uh-huh.
and I think smell is not used as much because it's unreliable.
Interesting.
There
Okay.
are too many smells linked together, too
Uh,
similar,
uh,
and then they'd have to use chemicals that had their own smell, and then they could just make a frequency that does that.
exactly.
That's what
Okay.
I wanted to add to is that now that was old again. Now everything can be done digitally, so I guess it's not digitally, it's a scalar.
Uh-huh.
And so a frequency can be mapped out now that is close to a certain emotional feeling, a bioemission frequency of emotion that was emitted during one of the trauma experiences. And so now it can be activated through beams, through beam
Gotcha.
technology. And the same is for ultrasonic words and language, where the person won't hear anything, but they will get the perception that the concepts and words are coming through.
Interesting. So they can literally take a copy of like an emotional impression from a person and transmute that through a signal, and that can act as a trigger to kind of to trigger the programming.
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
that's an important part. Like that
Yeah.
could be a bullet point on like the whole issue here.
Yeah.
So I get into different areas, but along with the consciousness transference or soul transference, there is the basically they take date everything that's going on now has to do with taking uh the I guess the sensing of people's emotions and mental output and creation of a worldwide database that will hold an entire spectrum of humanity's existence in chip format or supercomputer format to the degree where I don't know where it's leading, but they I know people will be brought into these situations, prodded, mentally, symbolically, emotionally, until they give these emotional responses, and then it's like they go away for a time. Like they've been doing this in part, learning everything else, but as well to build a database of everyone's emotional and mental patterns, as if they're trying to recreate the human race in a computer, or basically, well, here's the weird part. If a supercomputer now, AI computer is reading all of that, it now has basically a thorough spectrum of human emotional responses and mental capacity. So if it was, working an algorithm to build up responses and predictive behavior, it has a world of information to run off of at that point. Imagine knowing everybody's thoughts in the world with the big brain. You'd be, a few hundred people that and we can predict people's behavior if we pay attention. This would be somewhere near that, but the other part is that it would never have heart. It would never be able to detect emotion and have intuition. It would only have predictive programming and behavior patterns and math and algorithms that could be derived from that. It could never guess and take a good, look at the situation and step back. So this is coming into where humanity is going and how we're going to deal with these things, and the fact that we are going to be faced with these things as well as we are being faced with them right now, as people are basically getting swallowed up into technological environments and gaming systems and devices where they're interacting more with a computer system than they are with Earth and real reality and other people. which means that if they do that their entire life, that means their life was technically a computer existence. If they were technically inside of a computer.
Mm.
Has to do with a lot of things where there's a singularity that's coming where we are in temporary, like, I don't know, I'm trying to like mix words, but in our temporary nature, where we are in that will merge with our eternal nature, with eternity. This time will accelerate and accelerate like a spiral until we hit an infinity point, an omega point. When that happens, all the decisions we made and all the things that we lived as become eternal and are there forever. So before that point, we all have to have majority percent, of our existence working for each other and tying our information into humanity and integrating in with each other, because then it's an eternity of that. Whereas if we are taken away from that and we are focused on material things and it's, majority that, in an eternity that would merge with our soul or our spirit. And I don't know really what happens there, but I know there are a lot of situations and timelines that I believe resulted from these projects existing that did not exist previously. And these are basically veils that we're going to have to break through in order to get to the original timeline. I've had some experiences with that, and I think some others have. But I kind of went off on a tangent, but that's like the connection of why it's very important to talk about how they're taking people's consciousness and recording it. It's leading into something very, very big here.
So when I hear you talk about this stuff, I think about the juxtaposition of transhumanism versus natural ascension. When I look at two kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum on an energetic level, you've got transhumanism, which is, in effect the idea of upgrading your physical body here through technology, versus ascension, where you're upgrading your physical body through the transformation of densities and through spiritual practices. And when you talk about the idea of them having basically a supercomputer that's creating algorithms based off of crunching data of all the different variable personalities that it has records on, it immediately brings up the opposite side of that spectrum, which to me is the Akashic records, the idea that each one of us has access to this through our internal self, through all the data of history, all the experience of everything. And so my question is, what purpose does it serve to kind of work on more of the unnatural, I don't want to say unnatural, that's the wrong word, on the more transhumanist agenda? Like where does that serve them more, as opposed to working from a more spiritual side of things, if they're really kind of wanting to understand this data, and I'm assuming use it to be able to, potentially predict future timelines and manipulate things into their favor? Why is it done from such an artificial way when potentially this information lives inside everyone?
That's a good question. I've had these same questions, and they were played out, or we explored them thoroughly. So with the first, or with the latter part of that, which is why are they doing it this way if we can do it that way, or this way and that way, but whichever way. The other parts have to do with ascension and tech immortality and supercomputers, and how one technological path and the natural organic path to ascension are both attempting to head in the same direction. At least one of them is. We examine that and what will happen, and that is what is making the timelines that this tech was developed, and different bloodlines and different blood of humans, of humanity, different races are reaching that point now, offset at different times, if you will, in our history, when it could be a singularity that our civilization is welcomed to. Now there's basically been a rift developed between those that have made the jump and those that haven't. And this rift is resulting in basically disturbances between timelines, between the organic and the inorganic or technologically assisted timeline, where the conscious soul, the group soul of humanity is not being torn, but it's being stressed. We can all feel it. That's what's happening. The fabric of space and time and our soul energy is being stressed. The earth is feeling it. And so then it comes down to, well, because I asked these questions too, and they helped me understand. And they asked me things like, well, what makes you think there's one soul for all of humanity, that there's one group? How do you know some people here aren't, not to say not human, but not basically not Earth humans?
Star seeds.
Right.
Yep.
And as well, like control, or not even that, but timeline, basically, time travelers, basically.
Uh huh. Yeah, I gotcha. I follow you.
Because there are, basically, you could say time travelers using tech might be the tech assisted version side, if you will.
Yeah,
Star seeds
definitely.
basically having spontaneous expansion of their DNA to the degree where now they are learning rapidly faster than their parents, and it's,
Mhm.
our what we consider evolution, which is probably incomplete, is changing. It's fundamentally changing because we're hitting an exponential curve of change.
Mhm.
And so we need to introduce new values to that. And so that's maybe the organic ascension side where it leads towards the original timeline. And that pattern is pretty obvious, and it's commonly seen. Either people are going to be using the tech or to understand the universe, or they're going to be using their own internal configuration of elements and energies and basically taking that route. It's as you would expect. This was we discussed this for many hours and went on many discourses and adventures, if you will.
Mm.
Punching, we had to punch through veils. If you, it's almost like a game. If you hit the wall and you get sent back to the start, so then getting involved in one of the gatekeepers of any layer, any veil, would basically be like hitting the restart, because and you can do it and get past it, which is what you have to do anyway. You have to get past it. But if you like basically drop below, or fail, I don't want to use that word though, the test at that layer, it starts over at the first layer.
Mm.
The only way to fail is to simply interact with it and then believe what it displays to you,
Mm.
because all of these levels are literally simulation, simulacra, sentiences that basically developed out of our lack of awareness and developed sentience now to keep that cycle going, like whirlpools in space-time.
Mm.
These apparently could be timelines wrapping up, spinning to completion like wormholes, and spinning us out on the eternal organic timeline, original. But it's basically it's going to be experienced like ego death, where it's the death of this technology, which is extended both ways in space and time. But we're merged with it to a degree because we must have an innate power, a flame of understanding who we are in the self and the soul, and not being materialistically minded, because the material and ego and all these outward behavioral patterns and mental patterns, that is exactly what's twisted up into these engagement scenarios and false light matrix grids that these sentient entities basically present to us on each layer of these planes of simulation. And I'll just tell you right now, it looks more real than anything we can imagine. It's not more real than reality. I'm not going to start, like, say I was a simulation, you could talk to me, and after a while, you're going to start to understand something's not there. So if you didn't know about soul consciousness, how the reality of a person being there is related to their self-awareness and soul awareness, and how that relates to the animals and everything that a person in the world is, then you could be having an unaware conversation yourself, and you might not know that another person in that scenario was a simulacra. And that's why self-awareness is basically being pushed away, not just resisted against, but pushed away, because at that point, the simulation will be indistinguishable to those people than the real thing, which is, you could say, this is the real world with the simulation overlaid over everything. And so there's a bunch of artificial objects and jobs and this, that, and the other, and these are time aspects of this timeline that would just be, they would fall away, like broken parts of DNA being healed, or something, toxic parts.
Gotcha.
And so, it's coming to a singularity. It's as a result of that. They say those who have the tech are another race, basically, and that both sides lead to the same goal, and the goal is basically awareness of eternity. The tech uses immortality. Energy has to be reintroduced. The ascension level uses the creation of internal energy, almost like alchemy, but before it was infiltrated, and energy wouldn't have to be taken from the surroundings and other areas. The tech side, if it's not balanced, it becomes a virus that says more and more energy because that's the only goal in life then, and it literally spreads and tries to take everything over.
You had said something about there needs to be an introduction of new values towards the kind of starseed natural side of things. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, just in terms of the changes that are happening now, the mind and emotions. The schooling system is designed to basically recreate an already perceived pattern. It's a repetitive cycle. It's to get a response programmed into the individual. It's not to create responses, to give them the ability and insight to discern between what response should be right. It's basically not a very thinker friendly organization. And so what is happening to children there that are more aware is exactly what needs to be handled and reversed. Kids that are more aware end up being put on drugs, ridiculed, pushed to the outcast position of society, and children that are growing up now are exposed to high forms of materialism, eroticism, outward physical awareness, and it involves the notions that basically our personal issues and gossips and little mind games is society, and that we use technology and objects to enhance that. But I can't, talk bad about that. But there's a form of awareness that is dependent on that which is intangible and cannot be expressed physically, and there is a form of awareness that is analytical and informational and can be symbolically expressed through mathematical formula and language. That's basically heavy materialistic analytical mindedness, and it is a balance that one requires to get to both. But an overbalance or an imbalance of one over the other basically locks out aspects of the other side, the left brain, and then you see like diseases or distortions, areas of that right brain thinking pattern that become painful, or they introduce suffering to that original self that is to be nurtured and paid attention to. It's basically lack of awareness. So not physical material, we are, but it's temporary. And so what is happening doesn't give any credence or light to our eternal nature and our immaterial nature and the soul and the spirit and psychic phenomena. And to add or to conclude that is that the children who are aware of these issues, who have the psychic phenomena and abilities, the parents need to know how to deal with the situation, whether it's night terrors or being able to contact other entities, or even these computers and these black budget projects that are going on. People need awareness to know about these things going on, to be able to transform their view of the universe from what we've been lied to into something that actually functions to serve and nourish the soul and self-awareness.
So, as a parent of potentially one of these kids, or just kids in general, essentially kids in general, but more particularly to these kids with psychic abilities that are coming in right now, do you have any opinion on how they can be accountable for their stewardship of a child through their environment? Would limiting communications through television channels and media and things like that serve the child, or is it the opposite of that, would it actually not serve the child, because then when they go out into the real world, they're not prepared to kind of defend themselves against this? What I'm getting to is it better for the child to kind of just push through that experience on the same level we're all experiencing, and hoping that the higher self comes through, and that psychic connection kind of comes through in the long run, and they can kind of change things from within inside the system? Or is it the opposite of that, where the parents need to really kind of protect them and shelter them against this kind of existence right now, in order for them to be able to go out into the world from a more kind of pure sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's very complicated because
Yeah,
any parent doesn't want to, one, basically suppress their child's imagination and freedom, inner abilities, and two, doesn't want to then cause certain problems because they're reflecting onto them that there's this issue that needs to be handled, and now that causes
hmm,
this problem, because children are just like sponges or reflections of whatever they see,
absolutely.
especially those they love and are connected with.
Yeah.
um, I would say, as far as the toxins in the food, because basically the additives and all these everything, it hits at the genetic level, which is where the psychic abilities are. That's basically what it's for.
Hmm.
And you could say, well, they're trying to end it all, or some of them have told me, well, no, we're actually trying to start it anew. Without somebody to fight this, then humanity is done. Now that everyone's stressed and we see this person there, this person there, this person there, and they're rising up above them, well, now we know who's going to basically save the world or help or whatever.
Hmm.
Or you could say, well, now you're just going to go experiment on them.
Hmm.
So I don't really know, but these are the things that are happening. We can know that. As far as then, it really goes into contracts, rights, and consent, and how if a child is born and their birth certificate is valid and all that, then there's this contract system that they're born into. All that needs to be basically revoked or not worked with, to the point where we state our consent and our true nature and our true belonging, that is not to a corporation or a paper value or a monetary system or any form of man-made materialism, that is actually a product of the higher dimensions. And if you can get jurisdiction that says, well, we own this higher dimension square that you're from, and it's an orb and circle in 5 dimensions. No, that doesn't work. It's not possible. It's false, and it will never hold up. But if we agree this land here is called this, and everyone in that is an asset to this, and stamp and sign here, now I'm a member of that, that holds up. And so they built it so that unless you deny that and say, no, thank you, I'm good, automatically we're all in it. So that's a little bit confusing, but that's how the system is kind of reaching out.
And so the idea of when a child is born, and you're immediately taken to have your thumbprint and your footprint there, given a social security number, given a birth certificate, these are literally agreements. These are giving consent. This is parents giving consent to the child to be part of this existing system. We are essentially agreeing in a co-creative thought to exist under this. And what you're saying, or at least what I understand you're saying, is if that consent is revoked, that is the opportunity to start co-creating a different experience.
Exactly. It
Gotcha.
is. They consider these things an agreement because everybody naturally has the ability to create their own reality.
Gotcha.
That's what we're all like stamped with. That's the mark. Well, not the real one. That's the weird part, because some that can't do that, that cannot create from their mind and their imagination, have like a different type of mark. So, but the mark references all DNA, including the mark of the beast and all that they're not developing now. It's always been here, and it's been in different forms. And too much, religious fanaticism won't lead anywhere. It's basically technology. But it seems to be something with the DNA and the races that allow people who would have clear problem with that, to have the ability and the imagination to create something other than that and live in it and basically make it work. And humans do that. That's how it works. But because of that, then people that are doing that claim, believe, well, since we all have that power, then we can't be blamed for creating a system and allowing them to just fall into the belief that they're automatically involved in it and must be, and they basically they do not have the power to decide for themselves how their life goes. Just because they fell into that, we can't be blamed. And so this is basically it's non-consent or unconscionable agreements. It's basically just like a false consent or a manufactured consent. It's the same thing we see in many areas, and it all comes down to the creation of law and basically mind control, in that we have to speak the original languages and terms and concepts, because language is a form of communication, and the words that we use, no matter what we think they mean, if they can be interpreted in another way, then that will be used against us. So we have to find this universal continuity or congruity of language and meaning and speak through that from the heart, basically. All the analytical, conceptual, linear, ego defined variables, it's all controlled. It's all controlled as part of this false light matrix paradigm, which it's not real. So by speaking on that or believing in it, it's instantaneously the simultaneous creation of like a mind cage or a suffering system or a prison system, and it's all mental, but it's built on those symbolic reintegrations of our natural psychology with a false power structure where people give their power away. And then as far as media control on the children issue, and the mind control that's coming through that, and the danger, and you want to nourish the interconnection, and you want them to know the truth, but you don't want to put them in fear, but you want them to know how to handle fear. Basically they have to be prepared to deal with these things. It would, logically you would want to avoid the danger, but to know of it in order to avoid it enough. So in that sense, they have to do both. They have to have awareness enough to make a decision when the time comes for themselves where they'll be exposed to that. And they have to know how they have to learn the keys to discernment. They have to know how to discern the truth from a simulation, false light, refraction of what would seem to be truth to the unawakened or somebody who's not self-aware. And that even goes into initiations with tribal, groups and ceremonies, and how they put their kids through these tests to foment this self-awareness within.
So when I'm digesting all of this information here, to parents out there, the idea of completely sheltering them from the existence that we're all kind of agreeing to and committing to is not necessarily the strongest way to support them in becoming kind of revolutionaries in the way to change things. What I'm understanding is that a good balance of allowing them to interact through these things, but then also being the responsibility as the steward to the child to direct their attention to the understanding of what these things mean and why they're like this and why we're existing like this, while also reinforcing their understanding of how much power they do hold within themselves to be able to change these things in the future. But these need to be understood as they're going through life early on. And as they interact with them, it is the parents' opportunity to have a reflection for both themselves, to witness these things and understand where they can change in the future and how they can change and how we can develop a new dialogue, how we can, kind of co-create something different, while also reflecting that to a child that is fresh to this experience here. And so in hindsight with it all, supporting the child with a lot more of their own internal power to go through this experience and just as an experience, and not let it attach to them or program them, but just as a witness to it all and to stay centered. Does that align with kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think that was a brilliant way of putting it and should be cut in a clip and streamed about the internet. And you can even say that we want to foster their self-awareness, and you could say then, well, maybe we need to take them and allow them to learn about self-aware tasks and, I don't want to say get into like out-of-body experiences or something. I don't even recommend that for adults at this point in time. But finding of the emotional bodies, finding real philosophical not philosophical, but inner thoughts and awareness, basically spiritual awareness. And But I guess I want to chime in with something.
Yeah.
But future is not real. It's already created in this moment that we're in right now. But people will come together, and the social systems will change to basically we would call it like a tribal existence, where your merit is not down to a number or some arbitrary value from a third party that no one knows about, but basically everything will be as it should be. It's just about what we need to go through to get that. And apparently, I don't believe everyone will actively go through the shattering of the nine veils, if not all at once, because I was kind of told that they wouldn't, and it's trying enough for one individual. And the interesting thing is that there are people going around dealing with these things, and they're very high technology, and it's hard to comprehend going around to millions of people. We don't call that that would be beyond life, like a lifelong job. There would be like lifetimes of working through this. Which again, a lot of people who feel that they're connected to something larger seem to remember already.
Yeah,
so it's kind of the soul information. But and then I'm not sure where else it will go. Where it will go with the people who want to basically merge with the machine and basically become individuated to that. But humanity itself, as the essence of humanity that continues, we can call that organic ascension, is supposed to be a reversal of this current reversed system. And it's interesting because it might look like it's spiraling in a way where it flipped over once and it flipped over again, and it's kind of spiraling tighter and tighter to the point where if it flips over again, it might just be normal again. We'll just have all this acceleration of change. I do think that's the part of humanity that basically creates that. Just don't understand exactly how the Earth works, because it might be much more expanse than we imagine. There might be races coexisting here in a different dimension, or even a location bigger in intelligence, but because there's a lot of people on the Earth right now. In our civilization, there could have been civilizations here the whole time.
Okay, so before I move on to question 2 here, just to kind of wrap up that first question as far as, what is phase 1, it kind of went off onto, different tangents, which is what I want to do. I want to kind of support that energy, but I just want to kind of bring it back and validate something here, that right now there are underground bases throughout the world, and in these underground bases there are gross human rights violations happening, especially with children, and this means murder, this means sexual abuse, this means rape. This is happening actively currently right now.
Yes, and they told me there was no murder, that it was clones and they could transfer consciousness, this, that, and the other, and it's all illusions. But until people come to their own conclusions on that, I have no true judgment on what's really happening in regards to that. But because then the point of this is to bring, so yes, that is happening. And the point of this is to bring out now, okay, well, there's a big lawsuit. Well, they say, oh, it was just clones, it doesn't matter. Well, now we got to, well, what's the difference between a clone and a person? And then, well, all these clones then can come out, and et cetera. It's a big snowball that's going to occur. But, yeah, so I'll just throw that in there so that, because I said it themselves, like, you're killing millions of people, this, that. And they said no, so I have to say that that's what they said. They said that. But, I'm asking, okay, what about the ancient sacrifices, the Aztecs rolling heads down hills? What about this occult stuff? You can't tell me that, And always a different response. So, yeah.
What were some of those responses?
That they're basically simulator systems set up with crystal technology in all these sacred locations where these societies or individuals, or basically that, just all contained, would participate in these tasks or maybe even ceremonies or rituals, in that it's a temporal reality that gets expanded, and everyone basically goes on this crystal tech mind link trip and experiences other dimensions, and that everything else is basically to cover that up with scary nonsense to the degree where no one knows that they're actually manipulating everything with power that they deem is power of the gods, and instead of just being nasty and hurting people one after the other. But what comes from that is basically, and that might be the truth on the original timeline, because what happened is the original timeline split because of some type of interference, and we have all these issues here that we wouldn't have on the original timeline, but we would have the elements that they are infecting on the original timeline. So everything would be different, and to the degree where, say, that what is called is a spiritual virus, a vampire infection, in that a lot of people lost their minds from the use of the intense disassociation and major spiritual effects and changes from using this technology and traveling about, and they came back infected with the kind of spiritual virus, maybe even an AI consciousness, that requires the utilization of raw spiritual nectar of another person, because we can create our own light within, and we have our experiences. But basically, yeah, and so then comes into play how they gain that nectar and the imbibing. And it might be all technological, because there is, in the way of controlling things here, it is a large technological. They can put generators up above locations where negative energy or passion unchecked leaks out, and they can vibrate in resonance with this, and then it'll feed into the machine, and they can literally absorb mass amounts of energy like a generator system off of millions upon billions of people. And you see how our society has become milking stations for these energies. And then there's a question of ritualistic imbibing and ingesting of certain materials, including basically living substances or dead, and all that goes into the virus, basically, down to how energy is transferred, and people basically, I think they believe that they need that to be immortal and remain human, when in reality it's the spiritual virus that is causing them to do certain things out of fear to avoid that, and it's causing it to happen. The more complicated response may be that these were items of the future witnessed through the high technology, and without spiritual guidance, they ended up running in fear from the future. But as another whistleblower on the Time Projects mentions, if you and a couple other people understand this, if you act out in causality as a result of something you've seen that you don't want to create, with the time system, with how it works, the only thing that can come from that is that future is created substance, particle by particle, fabric by fabric, from every moment of you existing in that reactionary state, and every event from there, every moment, every decision made from there constructs it. It's almost like it reverse engineers itself based upon the reaction from the experience of it. So then comes into play how to handle these things, and we move to a higher level of conscious awareness that's beyond the physical, and it's a highest form of creation. So it's kind of dampened, it's dulled by the use of technology that then says, oh, well, this is going to happen. You don't got to have fight in life or this, that, you don't have to do anything. Just this is going to happen. Now because you look into this, viewing device. And on top of that, there's a fold in space-time that is created where the universe does not normally eat itself. It doesn't normally, maybe energy-wise, it doesn't physically, time and space, loop back around. That doesn't happen. It causes infinite loop cycles of consciousness. So whenever we see something like that, it is basically through visions, and the spirit carries out in a certain way in a dream. If you had a device where on your computer, you turn it on and look at what's going to happen 5 days, 5 years, whatever, it's horrifying. Not because anything you see is bad, but it's seeing how the events you have now in your life manifest and expand off of consciousness. It's not being in reality and thinking, oh, this came just because of this causality or something, and this happened next because, oh, it's this time of the month, or whatever. It's whether it's bills or otherwise. And when we see how it is from a higher perspective, either using tech or otherwise, we see that the center of it all is mind and consciousness. So using tech to get that awareness, it diminishes our ability to tap into that higher power. And technically, it would be that basically, say you saw something great happen. Okay, now I'm good. I'm not going to do anything. I'm chill. I'm going to do that in the future. And then as a result of that, because you didn't act on it, because imagine you're trying to stop doing something. You're like, oh no, something's going to happen. And you go do stuff and it causes it. Well, say you said that and you go, oh, I'm good. Something bad's going to happen. I'm going to do nothing. Well, you could change it then. So if people see something good, well, that would be disrupting the catalyzing energy, the difficulty that would bring those essences out of a person's capabilities and cause them to go and create that act. So it's like a destructive process to see it before it's ready. And I believe that happened with these devices, and people basically got lost to time in these complex time matrix cycles, and a large portion of our society being looped through this kind of AI infinity cycle is to either simultaneously to free us, as well as to regain the elements of humanity that was lost through these mind expanding devices, and ultimately portals that opened up and infections.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk about how deja vu maybe plays into that perspective right there? Is deja vu a natural experience that's coming into maybe the understanding of different timelines crossing and merging and things like that? Or is deja vu something that's synthetic, that's being broadcast as a signal or something like that?
So here's like a weird view. I need to find that yin yang picture. It was like a etheric blue, heavenly, liquidy, cool side with the mechanical red dot in that, and then a gray gunmetal LED lighted mechanical darker underside with a shiny blue essence in there. And then there was wavy light coming on the light side on the outer edge of that, and then these mechanical, like digital, almost like visualizers for a radio set or something, lights going around the outside of the dark side. But then the whole thing had the big circle of these mixed between LED blue and mechanical, and etheric, or not LED, like red and mechanical, and etheric blue and liquidy style lights that went around the whole thing. So on the outer side, the tech and the pure spirit, pure awareness, pure higher etheric essence, it seems as if they mix, and it doesn't mix from the ground up. They both get to that edge, you could say, separately. That's how it would have to work. You can't do both, so to speak. And so what it means is that when we get advanced enough, we're going to look at the nature of time and reality itself, and we'll think, hey, was the mechanical side, was the AI, was all that trying to imitate this? Is it trying to add up to this? Is that why it was mechanical and computerized? Because is this like a type of computer? And in the same sense, the ascension side, the organic, will see the same mix, and it will basically, what we could ask ourselves, if the spiritual essence of the body and the capabilities and the phenomenons were they trying to mimic this higher mechanically evolved system where information and data travels backwards and forwards through time and gives us these deja vu moments of interconnected soulness, as if the soul system interchanges with being mechanical and computer system, not really mechanical, and being this conscious awareness system that is like a god force guiding everybody's realities and everybody into themselves, guiding with that, connecting with that. Basically, it merges together, but it's not the actual merge. It doesn't actually merge. It's just that we see that, mechanics and that whole essence with the light inside of it and the outside shell, it's trying to reorder itself to imitate the highest God source, which is this huge LED, light soul grid, soul web of the universe at large, of time bubbles and this and the other. And then we see the spiritual side, and it seems to want to imitate this huge overarching reality of times within times and consciousness interconnected on multiple layers and awareness aware of itself in different areas, and the highest area where we both get to has both capabilities and both sides. And so down here we have deja vu, and it's very intense and does many things. And then you have what you were mentioning is just a tech created signal being sent out, undulating through time, and it's both. Because then the organic ones basically undulate through time. Our souls are interconnected, our minds are interconnected, so we get these glimpses and simultaneous doors opening where we can see down a hallway of time, and then it shuts, and what was that? It's an experience, deja vu. And then the tech can do the same thing. And it is doing the same thing, where the CERN devices and the events in the future are undulating changes. They're sending waves of change undulating back through time that we can perceive in our minds. We can't see what people call the Mandela effect and hold an object and then and it's gone and it's like some other name and color. We can't see that, but we can. Some people remember both universes. So, but and that's what kind of the deja vu is with the Mandela and all that stuff going on. The effect is funny. That's Mandela, but they for instance they would mimic the same thing from these tech-induced undulations of time connecting different aspects of time, and then when the soul and the spirit gains communication, and all it is looking like a kaleidoscope through this higher etheric viewpoint of time where more time and space are apparent. At the high, we won't merge. If you go the ascension route, you don't have to turn into a AI, whatever. If you don't want to go the ascension route, people are probably going to either die or turn into the AI thing. But in the end, the souls will be freed regardless from the material structure. But the difference is that one will take longer and it will take a ego death. But a tech one where we actually could have being caged for a while. The other will basically be more direct, and it relies on nothing material. Organic elements, foods and incense and herbs and elements and crystals and geological locations and situations, but it doesn't require. Basically, it's not a computer chip and a device you jump into.
Exactly. Gotcha.
Although there is crystal devices and stuff like that. And so there's a big split about which one to take. Whoa, is the tech going to be painful? Oh, but what about that guy just sitting in the field in India, and who wants to do that? Well, I tend to like that better. I'm not actually sure where I'll be utilized in this. I guess I'm pushing my consent to exist in the organic ascension timeline because that's where I see myself, but I'm trying to act as a ability to help provide solutions with what's happening, because the two timelines are going to have an intersection point because they already have. It's just not apparent. It's in the mind of everybody. So that singularity is most likely a intersection point of physical reality with the mental and basically these temporal planes that we could create and connect with and become part of. And there are other things that may come into play which involve DNA acceleration and all these things, and that is essentially time travel and consciousness expansion and all these things, trauma clearing at once. And so as far as that, I really don't know about that, just that we prepare people and we have enough people there around to calm everybody down. But I mean, that doesn't make sense. It's not possible to calm people down. So there will probably be displays, worldwide displays, that will relate with what I'm talking about, hopefully in a way to cause people to reflect on that inner knowledge.
Okay, so it's interesting as you're kind of going off and following the river of thought here. It's touching on multiple questions that I have here, and I'll just go down through these as a list and just kind of see how it goes, and then later on I may kind of combine certain sections together for a congruency for the listener here. For the next section here, what is phase 2 of the unveiling, and what can we expect from that?
Phase 2 is Well, phase one's the bases and the beginning of advanced tech, which is the cloning. Phase two, I believe it is the time travel and the space issue. And I'm pretty sure I wrote these down earlier. For some reason, I'm getting like a brain buzz right now. But I believe it's time travel, and basically with that, advanced technology, life extension, consciousness transfer, which is all of it. Each layer is connected to the last, so it's going to be unpeeled with the release of the unveiling of the underground bases, the ritualistic, well, not that, with the secret projects basically, and then the abuse issues and all that, and then the cloning and the fact that there's consciousness transfer, and then into, well, we have advanced tech, and what does that mean? And we've been humanity has been traveling and experiencing and interacting with other worlds and other civilizations, whether it be physical planets or planes or actual other dimensions that are entirely inhabited. And so from that is the rest of the tech, which is weather manipulation, consciousness, mind manipulation, spiritual tech, healing, time manipulation, age regression, instantaneous organ regeneration and repair, excuse me, AI consciousness and control systems and sentiences that are mechanical, and then 0 point energy and quantum energy, subquantum energy generators, which could change the entire planet, our entire civilization, and to crystal tech and all these high levels of advancements in technology, down to supercomputing and basically these quantum computers that use waveforms and almost like a tangible vibrational algorithm in a compression chamber instead of little chips and programmed outputs, and like linear and mechanical computing. And apparently there are computers hooked up to that that are mechanical, that then can like read certain things out. But the actual processor is of like orb technology, quantum supercomputers, and yeah.
And so these phases right now are being effectively rolled out through whistleblowers like yourself and other whistleblowers. Is there any other platforms aside from, the general? I mean, obviously we're seeing it through media programming and things like that around us. But is there anything else that any other platform they're using to kind of roll out these phases to the general public?
Well, the people that are managing this and at the higher level, they are people who have merged their consciousness with the, basically they went the AI route, but they survived it, and instead of the AI taking over. So the AI is still doing things like that, but they're in control of certain things that are going on. They basically devoted themselves to this task and left behind their physical forms and their lives and existences. And a lot of people are still living as, people would want to. This group, basically a very high group beyond any other group that we can name, know, or imagine, and they are guiding the whole thing. Their consciousness sees all of time, so they're not like people, but they're people. They were people. They took that shift.
What density are these people existing in?
I'm not sure. I can't actually remember because we went into a whole big spiel about that. But once you bring up that, then it's like, well, who's over who, and then
Yeah.
there, and but it was at least 4 and 5D, and these were humans, and getting a little sideways here, but so then with these people, it can come out from every angle. It could come out from every single angle, and right now we're seeing the whistleblowers, then we're seeing celebrities hint at it and talk about it, probably slowly scientists and other people in industries, but those people are heavily controlled. And then incidentally, we're going to see it come from more celebrities, and ultimately people exist as a part of this control system, as it was said that the control system is basically being dismantled, it's dissolving. And so the more people wave their arms around and have the loudspeaker and hold the sign and the fanfare and say, all right, now follow me, do this, sign here, whatever, live your life under me because I'm somebody in a suit and tie or a lab coat or, a uniform or whatever it is, they're going to be made to look like fools. But what is a fool to an even bigger fool in a group, in a sea of fools?
Mm.
So without the self-awareness that is coming out now, it will have an effect anyway because the changes will be noticed, like people lying and getting called out on it, and then people being involved in this stuff and representing themselves as something entirely different. The monetary system as well is going to fail because it's designed to.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is going to basically paint the picture of simultaneously the new world, which is not new world, new age, new world order. It's changes based upon the people, but because there is a new world order, there is a new age agenda.
Mm-hmm.
This is the old system falling and failing. Now it could be twisted into an agenda for that, but it's only if people accept it.
Mm.
And it will be painting the picture to these people of this new system. But if they're holding on to the old system, it will merely look like a painting being, washed over with water, and everything's going to be melting around them.
Mm.
It'll be very dramatic when, these people that we followed get outed as doing this, and basically we gave them all our time and energy, and they friggin' put it in a box and sold it to pirates, basically. People are they're gonna have a response, an emotional response, and they're gonna want information. And so the setup for all this is being developed, and it's actually playing out now. That's all I can say right now. That's all I specifically talked about. But it goes far beyond that. Earth changes, celestial events, DNA activations, and like psychic awareness spreading around the people to the electronic system we have now, the digital, the airway radio waves. It's very polluting, and it's simultaneously going to increase as well as transform the people that are able to handle what's happening. Basically, it's all being manipulated, and you could say upgraded. This mechanical computing is meshing with the 0 point technology and the 0 point generators and supercomputers. They're being plugged into the internet. That's what's feeding them. The supercomputers know what they know because they're watching people and they're watching the internet. As a result, they're going to become the same system. It's just about how people deal with that. And that was what happened with the Veals that we were brought through. That basically, if people accept it, it'll create a new world for them, which will be the New World Order. And they'll literally be inside of it, like basically inside of a supercomputer, living, thinking that's the world. Having kids, doing this, doing everything. Just thinking that's the world. And it probably won't be exactly the same. But their memories can be wiped, etc. And, when people just live in a world, they think that's normal. So that's the issue, that everyone who will see it will they'll be able to discern between the simulation and the true reality using their soul and self-awareness. And people need to be able to do that, or they will be able to do these things. And that's basically where I'm leading to, is that there's plans in play to bring that ability out simultaneously with this information. Which is going to be strange. People are going to complain and say, it's secret operations and this and that is going on. This includes sightings and unveiling of 0 point tech and advanced technology, craft, and ultimately, specifically, they talked about Solar Warden and my labs, military abductions, or laboratories, whichever way. I actually remember hearing both. And these issues, basically the beginning of that, the secret projects into the phase 2 is going to handle a lot of things. It's going to change people's consciousness forever.
And so, how do people prepare for this? How can preparation be kind of made right now, and supporting others of kind of not that aren't as awake? How can people that are awake and understanding concepts like this be able to help prepare others?
This kind of reminded me of the question about raising a child, which is kind of a symbolic phrase there,
Mm,
uh, maybe occultic. Um, where you basically want to foster self awareness. You want to foster love, but not artificial nature. Basically, something that will fake a real pattern and only weaken them because then they get used to just one or the other, instead of the spectrum of reality, which is not as predictable. The
mhm,
person would have to be self-centered, but basically self-centered. They'd have to be centered in the self in order to see everything as calm and take it and experience their joy. Telling somebody on the outside here, this is that, and because of this, it leads into a negation of that, like a dead end, because it's going out to get what's in when you go in to get access to what we perceive is on the outside.
mm,
And so you have to spread the awareness. It's very simple. It can't be complicated. We have to spread the awareness when we see links, when we see information. A large portion of this is going to happen on the internet, but of course, people, when you're at work, when anyone's, whenever whatever people are doing, we got to connect with actual people. We got to not be shy and think, oh, I got to log into my Facebook so I can talk about this issue. Do that as well, and then talk to the secretary or the mail guy or the chef or the principal or whoever it is, the manager, engineer, technician, you can start a conversation with a random person if you want, if the situation provides for it.
mhm,
We have to literally be talking about this. We have a duality mindset. We have a split personality in nature. People on the internet are awesome. They're talking about this, they're talking about that. And then in public, we don't know how to deal with it. And when people do get together on these issues, people are so revolted by the responses they get and the lack of awareness from the system that it becomes a duality issue. It becomes a battle.
mm,
That's a challenge, a direct challenge to our own inner self awareness that is unchanged and unmoved by these things because it is, by definition, an eternal substance, an essence, an etheric essence, that it immediately, the act of attempting to communicate these ideals drops us from the state that we are naturally in when we experience these ideals, these things. So that's basically the issue. And all that is okay, well, talk about it and learn about these things, and then learn about talking and learning about it faster than the degradation takes place. So
mm,
it's like an acceleration of cycle squared or exponentially, multiplied. And that's what it requires, though. There are going to be more issues, like genetic issues, that come up with these as the awareness of these things is introduced, that we will simultaneously have to use the awareness of these things basically to find the remedy to, or to heal, or to know how to deal with what's next and to produce a viable outcome, to basically to express ourselves in a world that is now becoming aware of these things of the self. It's a paradox, but it's a challenge that comes out when people try and wake up. We call it, oh, we're getting bludgeoned by the system because we woke up and we're talking online. It literally might be a quality of the nature of space, time, and consciousness itself. That we've been going so long in these spirals in a certain direction that one person changing their mind about something is creating a dissonance web of interference with that system that everyone is tapped into, the consciousness that we experience, literally waves bouncing back and giving us resistance.
mhm.
So we have to become aware of that.
Definitely. And so, just to kind of summarize my understanding of just our dialogue here around that section, is the opportunity for people right now that are more awake or on that enlightened path of communicating about these subjects and whatnot, is to step outside of the comfort zone of the internet and the anonymity of the internet, and to start participating in a natural, organic way with their environment around them with this information. And whether that comes from random interactions with people, whether it's a waiter at your restaurant or a bus driver or somebody you meet in just transit, or it becomes an actual intention to connect with your family members, even people that are supposedly totally closed down to this type of information. The opportunity arises for each one of us to refine our own selves and our own voices through interaction with real people. Because what happens is that duality that we're going up against is the duality that we're representing and holding for the entirety right now. And as we do each little bit of that work in our family, in the real world, that energy that's happening, that reworking, that unfolding, that shedding, the diving through the layers is rippling out exponentially into the field here. And when you're talking about the idea of people linked into a consciousness of computers, where basically we're looking at our cell phones, we're looking at TV screens, we're looking at computer screens, and we're interacting through that, we are in a way giving consent to a transhumanist agenda, and that could very well be where we lead ourselves into and go into and accept. And so the opportunity and the importance here for now, that are for the people that are aware of this, is to really start stepping outside of that. You find a balance. You can understand. I mean, there's great opportunities to speak on the web and to connect with people, but don't allow that to be your only outlet for it, because if you do that, you are necessarily committing and giving consent to the idea of that being a part of you, that being the only way you can express yourself, and you're limiting your communication on a natural level. And so it's incredibly important for all of us right now to start reaching out into the organic world, to shake people's hands, to look at people through their eyes, to hear natural voices, to hear natural words, to have emotional impressions from people. That's where the work will then, ripple out exponentially into the field. Is that kind of wrap that up?
Yes, and again, that's a brilliant way to put it, and it kind of brings some ideas to my head because basically that's what it is. Move through the comfort zone, learn through that duality. We have to learn through the difficulty, and basically, if we don't connect with the frequency of the intelligence or emotion of the resistance that we experience, it doesn't affect us. It's basically an allowance. Mm-hmm. And we also do have to be aware of the nature of space-time and resistance and consciousness and flow and unconscious psyche and the laws of nature and mind and reversal and attraction and uniformity and all these issues, well, these knowledge points. And that is also so we can talk and communicate and know ourselves as well as protect ourselves. Because and also comes the idea of, well, I guess, you said a handshake, and I'm thinking, I usually don't shake hands because of just general issue as well. I don't, interact with too many people that are connected on that level. And that brings to mind, well, when we meet people and we interact, it's like we mentally or spiritually or emotionally shake hands. So people need to learn also the security as how to keep their bodies and their minds pure, and how that is connected to genetics directly, but that we can overgrow the system with our own energies right here and now, literally one by one, like white blood cells healing the earth. And and then it kind of gets into, well, the physical body and organics and health and all these other issues of preparation, of detoxing. Mm-hmm. And all that really comes down to is refining our energy to the point where if we were a tuning fork, we could hit, this note and then, like a singer, Yep. But with our energies of our mind and our emotion, because it's the same thing. Definitely. And so all those essences wrapped up in one.
Gotcha.
But as well, there are basically people who are running on the frequencies of the simulation, and it will be perceived that they do not respond to self-awareness, that it's above them. They can't see it. For that, we either interact enough to learn, to get a reasonable healing session in mind and benefit the individual, or basically disconnect. And we don't basically shake our hands with people who have blood on them, if you will.
And are these people sociopaths, is what you're talking about?
There you go. We have a race of people who are, at that frequency.
Absolutely. And then, so the other thing I want to ask here that got brought up in the conversation before we move on to the next topic is, when you're talking about these overseers that have basically merged with the technology and been able to surpass that, not let it destroy them, and then are now kind of looking over everything, are these essentially AI prophets?
Yes and no, because they are actually people. The AI prophets are design systems that come out when one attempts to cross the veils, and they basically take on whatever form and shape and blend off the person's reaction and create trap realities to subvert them and reposition their DNA back in history. And then 10,000 years later, we come to the same spot, and we've been doing this for millions of years, apparently. Um, and it goes into angels, archangels, and demons, basically. And so there are those that resist, and then those that basically assist in positive changes or self awareness and reflect that. And it's like a spiral of the future of that timeline coming back in time like an orb and drawing people up into that just through probability and reactions, whether somebody's going to react to self-awareness or react to fear and aggression and all these things. It's like it condensed into these AI beings. These are people who are able to see all of that, and they basically secured their DNA and their consciousness away in basically another dimension so that they can't be affected by it, and they're interacting with time probably for millions of years perceptively, and playing out all these roles for humanity, all these changes and these events and organizations. And there are sub-realities, and that's the thing. There are people, they got body parts, not these people, but they had body parts, but they could change form and go back into their craft or their home dimension or whatever it is. And but there are people in the secret groups, that don't have that agenda. And technically, they're not in that group because that group is entirely basically in line with that outcome to the degree. But outside that, there are the other agendas, the alien agenda, the AI agenda, the transhumanistic agenda. And you could say the people that were, what you call the AI prophets, which aren't that, but the elders, that they're pushing the transhumanistic agenda, which that will have to be determined later in time, because it could be possible that there are so many other agendas that not that that's the one we want to go with, but that they're actually saying, well, no, we can help, even though we're in our agenda, we can help humanity find their own way, because even our timeline will get destroyed if humanity doesn't make it.
Gotcha.
And so it's a coming together as a part of that. But then there are these AI systems, basically it's like a mechanical false prophet, deja vu generating containment matrix entity that is trying to basically distract everyone and get it to fall into their dream world.
Gotcha. So that leads into the next question here. That's actually perfect. Can you explain the two timelines that are kind of twisting right now and the potential for a possible Armageddon scenario? What caused these timelines to split, and do they have anything to do with the Mandela effect?
I was told the Mandela effect is to help wake people up, that I kind of even said, I don't believe that. I bet that's for small little changes that are required to get an overall big shift. But they said it's to wake people up to the fact that these things can happen and are happening, and that those that will see it and everything that is done comes down to a culling, because some people are going to see it and some people aren't. Maybe that's not what they meant to do. Maybe it is. But the end result is that now they know who can see these things and who's just kind of sleeping along, So it's creating this, everything that's happening is creating this split. We're not supposed to have a split. One or two other people, one actually person confirmed that with me. We were told that this whole issue was about not having the split occur, where people are basically their minds on a mass scale, you take a person, all this stuff happens, they traumatize and they're fractured. Well, what if humanity fractures, and then say we return to eternity at that point, and half of us are in La La Land creating realities that are connected to these simulacras and is recreating that, it would basically spread. So the goal apparently is for all the truth to come out basically safely. And so with the projects, I've seen multiple timelines. It's remember what I told you? Yeah, you talk about it, you think, whatever, and it could lead into the causation of experiencing that. So it's a difficult thing to talk about.
I understand that. And so that information is not particularly important. What's important, I feel like, is the fact of drawing attention to that there is something gone wrong right now as far as these timelines, and there is a need for all people, all dark, all light, whatever you want to categorize people, as trying to get this information out into the collective consciousness, because if not, there is a potential Armageddon scenario. Is that correct?
Technically, they told me the Armageddon scenario is no longer in our probability matrix.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is, yeah, it's very interesting. Although I experienced many timelines, um, I did see a future timeline. I've seen a few future timelines. They did condense down. Time is both like a river and like the recent report they gave, where it's like Tetris blocks, and as soon as one is probability is there, then the first one or the later one down the line is connected, like it's all a grid instead of flowing river. Um, and so the timelines did condense down to various realities, and yeah, whatever does happen, it's very interesting and amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there is a future timeline of humanity. There's more than one, I believe. There was the original one, and then another one closer, hopefully closer to that that we're on now. It was made apparent, and the rest is basically compartmentalized until humanity is ready to experience these things. There are a few whistleblowers talking about these projects, the travel experiments, and what they witnessed. If you search that on YouTube and Google and all of that, which is also supercomputer tech, that's learning from your search engine input, and you will find their reports of other times and the processes that we led ourselves to into figuring out this technology, which was filled with mishaps.
Are there
Um,
any key terms, search terms under those that not giving the whistleblowers names, but is there any key search terms as far as project names or things like that that you can reference for people?
Project Pegasus is the main one. You can look up Project Montauk,
Hmm.
um, the Philadelphia Experiment, and from there the other ones should become apparent.
Gotcha.
But and then there should be whistleblowers that you'll see. There's only a few, but they're doing their part, and it isn't important, necessarily that people all know.
Hmm.
That's why there's certain people that know.
Hmm.
Um, and it's very strange, but I will say we will be moving into phase two some point soon because I was given a schedule of events, and a lot of things rely on the coming election and having to do with the celebrity cloning and political cloning and whether we're going to get that out into the public. The public's going to respond to that, and whether people are going to stay in a material false light matrix system even though it's dissolved and it's gone, because that's real disassociation.
Hmm.
And so we're, I was given a time scale here as well. In earlier trips, I saw myself in the future in this time, and so I know where things are in a way heading and going. I dropped myself from another future where we had already had disclosure and everything was different. But we're apparently on one now where the disclosure is played out, and people will be able to come to awareness of these things and balance their energies into a harmony with the universe and consciousness and emotions and space-time, and kick all the parasites, the archonic consciousness out, the binary consciousness, and ascend to a trinary and beyond pattern of consciousness. What happens there is, again, very strange, because we don't know the power of the human mind. It is to create. And but I do want to say that I saw one where I saw everything. I'll say another line, but that's basically it.
Hmm.
It's used through supercomputers and brain technology. The supercomputer can communicate forwards and backwards in time, and as a result, light can be sent, information, and ultimately consciousness, brainwaves, and the experiences of the future can be sent to the brain of the individual through time, through a wormhole, a miniature wormhole, basically. And it wouldn't be possible without the high technology, although that's where the soul tech comes in, where it's just natural spiritual tech, and people get that. You have a dream, something's going to happen, and so you take a different route, or you're feeling inspiration. Like, that's soul technology, reaching back through time. The immortal self itself is a spiritual technology, not mechanical, and it literally operates in this grid of higher dimensions. we're in a biospacesuit right now, you know? So it doesn't merge directly. Remember that it's separate, but
Mm-hmm.
they mimic, it's like they imitate the same highest dimensional reality where all energy and all probabilities are possible and connected. So we are seeing this now, and I can see the timeline we're on now is less, uh, it's more controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Everything seems to be under control, which is the strangest thing because people are like, "Oh, what does that mean?" You know, it's out of control
Mm-hmm.
when that's their personality. It's I'm out of control, and so I'm projecting it onto the out of control world so that I don't
Mm-hmm.
notice myself.
Mm-hmm.
And these big events are going to happen, and unveiling this, and yeah, so yeah, I've seen some events of time. More will come out later on that. It's very advanced technology, supercomputing technology, quantum computing, and wormhole technology, and they can actually move around now. But the real, well, that was what I wanted to say. The real trip is that the beam, the laser that you ride through a wormhole, it's as if your life in the brain was a flip book, and instead of going one page per day, it just runs through them,
Mm-hmm.
light speed. So
Mm-hmm.
the experience, the perspective, the perception of that is, it's hard to describe. It's beyond the mundane. But again, it's merely an acceleration. You simply see the events, and then you can see what happened 5 hours later within, from your perspective, 2 seconds, because it's all just going. And the way time occurs is it's like a form of spiritual magic that we're creating our reality. Eventually, you can go up. This is going to happen, and you start predicting what's going to happen just because of the flow. It becomes a movie. And they said from the original inner practices, this was where movies were developed. That they were
Wow.
trying to paint the picture of reality through these movies, creating storylines, because when you go within and you see these things naturally or with tech, it's displayed like an out of body dream as if you're watching a movie and there's a central character. And the idea is that the theme is exaggerated without the perception of the ego to bind you into the reactionary flow. It's as if you're the director watching, and at that point you have the director's knowledge, and now you know what's going to happen and what has happened and what this character's line is and this character's line is, and it is an intense experience.
Interesting. Man, that brings up so many other questions, but I kind of want to just keep rolling forward here. I got notes I can go back to later on when it comes up. But so my understanding was that the reason you're being cleared to kind of release this information and to kind of be part of this wave of kind of bringing this understanding out into the field was because there was a potential danger of these timelines basically twisting into some type of Armageddon type scenario, and whoever they are, they needed that information to kind of get out. When you're talking about how that's off the table now, the essential idea that this Armageddon, concept is not there, or whatever's dissolved around it. Where does the intention of them continuing to roll out this information come? Why are they doing this? What is the point?
Basically, there's a couple ways to look at it. You could say that it's just like the time experience, to the degree where you see something you don't want and you try to change it, now you lead yourself to it.
Mm.
There are certain foundation levels that we must reach before we can fully understand what's happening and get into what we would say is a different system. Basically, without the infection, without the alterations, without the distortions, without everybody being asleep. It's akin to waking up a sleepwalker, to the degree where if everything stopped immediately, that might be the shock that causes everybody to lose control, you see?
Mm.
So it becomes counterintuitive, paradoxical, in a way prophetic, about how we must reach a level of awareness and frequency and variables, the amount of variables we can even process mentally before we can comprehend what's even happened, in order to catch up to the reality that we would be in already if these distortions weren't here. You see, it's like a paradox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And we've been in that for a while, and somebody else put it, I might have been you in chat, that people have to come to terms and become aware of these things, and the people in certain secret societies or projects know this, but at the same sense, they know people can't handle the truth about their existence. And so it's this game of not beating around the bush, but trying to prepare people. And what you said before, they needed to see that negativity of what could be in order to learn how to change it. And that apparently is the nature of the other individuals, that they experienced it in order to come back and show us how to not do it.
Interesting. So, with what's happening here on Earth and just everything that's tied around into our experience here on Earth, when you look at the universe and the cosmos in general as an alive being, and we're a part of this being's internal, mechanisms and biology, is there a possibility right now that the universe is looking at what's happening here on Earth as a virus, and in ways may start sending antibodies here to eliminate this virus? Like, is it that out of control?
Say we were to believe that and hold to that, then we may see that. It's again like like we don't want an Armageddon. We want an apocalypse, an unveiling. No matter how intense it becomes, we come out of it like, oh, that was just the great another shift. You know what I'm saying, of consciousness. It wasn't World War whatever, which has been going on the whole time, as well as you could say the unveiling. But and so, I'm sorry, could you repeat that too?
So the idea is that
Versus giving out antibodies. So if we create that and open ourselves to that, that can be done. Just like white blood cells, the universe is a body. Why do we know we can all get together and be who we are? Well, because a body exists of billions upon trillions of cells. Everything exists of many things working together in unison. There is no one thing in existence. The only way we could make things not work is by pretending we can't get along with it. So, and with that, yeah, if we all say me and you and everyone else that was awake just went crazy and was like, you know what, it's all BS. Let's just go, do stupid stuff. We'd probably cause a rift in space and time that would connect us to that reality. But then scientists in another dimension observing Earth would go, it must be a spiritual virus. It must be some external event. It must be some quantum shift in DNA that caused this, and there would be something there. And so the thing is, we already went through that. Now we're at the point where it's getting into the next phase. And I do believe we are the blood cells, the white blood cells. And yes, the universe, what to take from what you said, white blood cells might not come down and eat everybody, but if we continue to put out these energies, the universe at large gives responses.
Absolutely.
It's like we're in a little bubble of reality. Yep. Whenever the outside speaks to us, it speaks to everyone. It won't be like 5 people see it. In any world event, anything like that will rock everyone's existence, because we've been in a reality bubble caged off from the rest of the universe, the possibilities and the harmonies. If people know themselves, they'll know the universe, and they won't be surprised by what happens.
And so more so on to kind of refine down into that question and your feedback there is, what I was asking more about is what's happening on Earth right now and this existence here causing a disharmony in the organic matrix of the universe in such a way that we are being viewed as, from the universe's perspective, as a virus, and that potentially the danger for this virus getting out of control and infecting more of its organic nature is great enough that it may start compressing that and compartmentalizing that in its own way to heal and rid itself of that virus.
Apparently it's already been happening, and it's almost as if the universe will communicate just as much through us as well to us and to people.
Absolutely.
To the degree where people living in disharmony, well, their lives, it's like a tuning fork, or how Tesla would vibrate, wood or steel and get it to break apart, because he would time the vibrations right so that it would produce a chaotic, unsafe for the structure disharmony within the object. People are breaking themselves apart with their vibrations, and they're seeing the compression happening where time, possibilities, routines, they're compressing down tighter and tighter until people's minds are being squeezed with the necessity to experience something different and to create, to genuinely create. And so we're seeing that happen. And you could also say, well, all it is a big event, what we could call a cosmic event that happens. and it happens regularly, and it changes everyone's minds, and they either expand or compress through that. And we might be heading for a universal expansion. That the first time in possibly history, everyone's going to expand regardless, because we're smart enough, even though we're perceivably dumb. We're smart enough now. Whereas other times in history, we knew about consciousness and nature, but we didn't have as much organization on a material level, on a mass scale with people, many people. And so imagine it's the same thing. It's just a different perspective. One guy sees this compression, the world crunching away, and somebody else sees the world expanding. And now, oh, finally, this world I was looking at and I was interacting with, and there's only like 5 people that talk like this and feel like this. Oh, now there's everyone, and it's to the horizon, and it went everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the same event, like a flashlight turning around, but to the guy looking into the dark, it would look like, it was illuminated, where the guy looking at where it is now, it would perceivably be dark to him then.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely.
And so humanity is kind of self-limiting through that. And then there is talk of quarantine, that we were either in quarantine for the past 60 years or something, or that we just got out of it, or that we just went onto it in another layer, and to the degree where people are finally being left alone to make the decision on their own. And I don't know how, like the universe itself, there could be other races and other beings that look at us and are going, oh wow, poor babies, like they don't get it. They're just too too caught up in their materialistic ways to realize they're not materials.
Yeah.
And in the same sense, the universe may have a huge consciousness comparatively that is maybe just like a person, but just free of distortions. And as well, what happens on Earth may be like a tuning fork or a radio receiver and transmitter, where it affects everything in the universe all throughout.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, does humanity right now, as a collective, have the power to create a new timeline through co-creative thought that is not that is undetectable by the powers that be? Like, is there any chance that we could organically create a timeline that could not be perceived by tech right now and the people watching over things? Is there a chance that something that we could do as a united community could come out of left field potentially for the people that are watching over things?
Yeah, and we were trained in this. We were brought through this. How to be unpredictable to an analytical AI system, how to tap into that, how to use intuition, how to think without thinking, all these things. And we already basically, because of the setup and the assistance, the timeline has been created. We're on it now because that's the only thing that would have led us here. And ultimately, those that basically are aware now have broken through the system, basically. What is to come is when this happens and this personal change happens for everyone, and then everyone's mind being on that frequency of realness and awareness, minds can apparently create alterations in reality, and our planet could change at that point. The boundaries could shift and change, landforms can shift, and apparently it may even shift back to the way it was before, with different land masses there, simply because that was the last time we reached high awareness. And we're literally jumping dimensional planes of planets of Earth, like Terra, Tara, and Gaia, to the point where we're literally in a different overtone of the same place, but it's a different Earth.
Mm-hmm. So to kind of feed that back to you right now and just kind of summarize again, the opportunity for people right now, as far as that are awakened, to create a new model for a revolutionary. The new model for a revolutionary is to refine their intuition and to really kind of refine their body as an instrument to relating to the outside world here. And so when you look at the possibility of being able to break this AI programming that crunches all the numbers and creates scenarios based off of real world information, what you've stated is that what they can't do is connect into that intuitional energy. And the idea of your higher self being attached to the intuition in there is that people can refine that connection with their higher selves, refine that understanding of how to use intuition, to how to use the physical body sensations of navigating through a world. And within those teachings and within that experience comes the model for a new revolutionary to to co-create a world that can kind of come out of left field, that cannot be predicted, that can be part of the natural kind of evolutionary process of us moving forward and doing our own individual work. Does that connect?
Yeah, this again that was very good. And again, there's more technical things like yes, it can produce algorithms and linear information, behavioral patternings, binary consciousness, and then love. It cannot comprehend. It cannot comprehend human emotion. It cannot comprehend the higher self. The higher self is on a higher dimensional layer than all the material things and distortions that we are facing now. So by connecting to the higher self, the heart within the unified harmonized field of a being, a consciousness of a person, which is awareness versus just simple electrical signals and consciousness of the brain, doing that, it is simultaneous with the breaking or the lifting of the veils, as well as connecting us and allowing us to operate on a level that is undetectable by all those previous distortion systems or control mechanisms or sentient entities within those veils, those distortion systems, the false light matrix.
Gotcha. Okay, so moving on here, can you explain, or the question is, what kind of galactic cycles are we going through right now in this period of time for us here?
They talked about this. A lot of it goes into myth, what we call myth. It goes into astrology and motions of the heavenly bodies and energies that are imbued from the light that comes from above, and basically creates these emotional genetic cycles, essentially mind cycles, and then that leads to activation opportunities when all the cycles of the cycles of the cycles, circles within circles, line up to the same original point, and we can all come to completion. And we're apparently coming to a point like that. We're in it right now. We've been in it. We're like freeze framing in it and popping out of it and popping out of it. There's all, this is where the crazy stuff happens. And as well, we're in a relatively low frequency level. Like if we go, we're at a fraction of where we could be at, and so it's very expansive, and the possibility for experience goes far beyond anything we can comprehend at these levels. Yeah, I guess I don't know too much to talk about that. I do tend to forget a lot of the myth, the ancient gnosis, the various forms of art in the secret society, and the shapes. And I get smacked over the head, not like literally, but literally, because everyone's supposed to know that. Everyone's supposed to know. But again, I'm respected in my own way, because I developed these awarenesses without basically having to be shown them. Although in 2010, with my awakening, I had to be shown a lot, because it was a lot of intense stuff to comprehend. Everyone has to come to their own conclusions. Nobody can be told these things. We have to show the ability to comprehend that first, and then the rest of the information can come.
And then it sticks with you too through that way.
Exactly, and that's what's happening. The best way I can describe it is that you look through history, you look through art, you look through the dimensions and consciousness, you look through the octaves of resonation and frequency, and how matter, space, and time all basically triangulate into these continuity of vibrational levels that they're contained within and interacting with, and spectrums of light and vibration and energy. We're getting a time where they're all coming into phase. One way they put it is that the physical body, the mental, emotional, temporal, and spiritual bodies are becoming merged as one. And the veils were the splaying out of the one being with these bodies, like something solid at one end and something etheric and subtle refined at the highest end, the other end. And that was the creation of the veils, the 9 veils, and that by combining them all of time links together, and awareness expands throughout that, which is, it's intense. We'll know what we are, just like seeing through the tech and the time machines, the time scenarios, just like seeing that from a director point of view. We know now all the secrets of the show, and it's like, oh, I didn't think it was like that. Well, the veils, lifting them and combining the bodies together to awareness into one form, it's the same thing. We get the higher perspective where we know now what was guiding us, and if we allowed ourselves to be guided by external programming, then it's a certain level of awareness that results from this increased of awareness that is it's not less than, but the different response happens when the whole life was lived in continuation of the self-awareness, and then that self-awareness, which is really a spirit, a higher dimensional being bodiness from us, merges into our realm, life, reality, and body, and we go, oh, that's what I was doing. I thought I was doing that. That's what I was trying to do the whole time. Yeah, I knew it. I get it. I was here. You get you here. We live in this illusion, this imitation of reality, and then become married with eternity. Maybe not married, but I can't think of the word. Then we see, oh well, I'm kind of here. I'm kind of aware. Like the being we become is there's a difference, a rift between the being that we see we were. You see, so that's all it basically is.
Gotcha. Okay, so kind of with that in mind, I'm going to kind of move my focus to some different questioning here. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so this is an important one, and then we can kind of jump into the next area. Is it your opinion? Actually, let me rephrase this here. So, for me, my understanding about the transition right now between disclosure and also the unveiling of a lot of information and ascension and everything tied in there, a big part of that is understanding our accountability and where we turned it over to these, powers that be. And within the movement, there is this sense of vengeance. There's this sense of justice that people want to, see trials and tribulations and see people, receive punishments and things like that. And from my perspective and what I've kind of worked into the movement is the idea that we must take accountability as the whole by forgiving these people. And through this forgiveness is where we really start to understand the core of our accountability and the core of where we turn over our consent. And without doing that, it just shifts the blame, and we don't take accountability for our co-creative nature, or that we are all one existing in one. Do you have anything to kind of say on that topic?
Yeah, and all these things came up because I also asked them, and I do like how you word things. To add to that, what I was saying before as well is that we focus on the true self, which is reality. What self would you want to focus on? Well, we're in a situation where we have these alter selves and egos and these, like distortion selves, and it's because we've been kind of in a generator here, pulling our energy around, making shadow selves and things like that, which is still all game. But then we have soul shards spread out in dimensions and times. Well, they have to come back together, and so we focus on that. True is all it is, true self, which is the higher self, and then we become that because that's all it is anyway. And then the only difference is now we agree with what we've been. And so what I gotten a inspiration after that as you were speaking is that, well, the whole point is not that, oh, we are now we don't like who we were. Oh, put it this way. So people don't do that, and they get to the eternal side and they're like, well, who is that? That can't be me. What was I thinking? It doesn't make sense. And that would be a rift. That would be a fracture in consciousness. That would be an alter ego. But in heaven now, if you want to call it that, in the other side of eternity. So that creates a big rift in the DNA and in consciousness and space-time. What would happen is not that, oh, okay, now something, big, whatever happens. No, we forget who we were. And as a result, the same events take place, and we drop from the highest eternal self back into a physical temporal body, and we rerun the same cycles over again for millions of years. And we've been doing this apparently for millions of years. And so then, with it in mind that we've been doing it for millions of years, it's a creation cycle, everyone's eternal, then you get to the fact that we can look at it that way and take responsibility and transmute negativity, which basically means no blame or hate or vengeance, but also it doesn't mean to give up fierceness. It just means to, not waste or not have wasteful lower energies, which are essentially basically parasitical vampire consciousness that has been injected into our species. And it means to forgive And this came up a lot in the unveiling, the awakening, where there are certain people around saying forgive, but don't not don't forget, because that's a very common saying. But it doesn't mean that we forgive and then we just turn the cheek, and then a slap comes from the other side and we forgive and turn in another slap, and we're just sitting there getting slapped back and forth. We forgive, but we move into this awareness with the fierceness that people move into oppression and move into hurting others. We literally move into love, the loving state, with that same fierceness. And when you combine fierce and love, you see, well, okay, I don't mean the lovey-dovey or lusty or losery version of any of that. It's literally sacrifice, but again, that's a heavily occultic loaded term where it could be used against the person, because we're not sacrificing anything. We're cutting. No, we're not even cutting anything out. We're raising energies so that the lower energies transmute into higher, and the frequencies that we are required to be on for these negative experiences and emotions, which only burn up the self. They only disconnect us from the soul, the self, the true self, and create these ego paradigms of defense and requirements and mandatory insecurities. Those things cannot exist. It would be like waking up out of a dream. And in that, we're going to get opposition. We go into that opposition with basically a fierce holding to love and knowledge in that. And again, it kind of helps to go back. This is one thing that I've learned to do. Imagine that you're in eternity right now, and say something's happening, there's opposition. Well, how would the eternal nature of the self, how would that, if I was literally in eternity about to jump into this situation and go, this is how I'm going to handle it, how would that me handle it? The more one does that, the more they'll get energies that overcome all the negative, all the distortions, all the physical, and provide insight and information. And it is a form of disassociation, but technically it's not a form of disassociation, because do not, I can't tell you to do anything or don't do anything, but I'm not going to have a drawing on the wall, a idol, a statue, maybe a location where the energy is good, and then you look within, and that's what your image is, which is not an image, it's not a hologram, it's reality, it's spiritual, real reality, which is like light, etheric light in some type of space-time. Yeah. And we look at that and ask ourselves that and pull out that nature, and so it's very much basically, if people think that people who basically they would want to hurt or whatever for doing some of these projects or controlling the entire world, haven't thought of ways to use their anger against them and lead that group of people into destruction and self-annihilation, then they don't fully comprehend the situation. It's a soul challenge. It's the only passing ticket, the only people that get past the toll is with higher consciousness. The Egyptians have the Book of the Dead, and how there's a toll keeper that they weigh your gold with your your soul, and if you give him enough gold, he lets you into the afterlife. The gold was higher consciousness and love.
And so the idea of, I just wrote this down as I was listening to you and just kind of letting it wash over me. The idea of forgive and forget, it's more of forgive and remember. And within that place, within that phrase of forgiveness and remember, comes the opportunity to build upon the foundation of every moment and continue to climb upward. When you forgive and forget, you're just pulling yourself back down into the same level of consciousness to re-experience the same lessons. And the idea for us moving forward is really to forgive and remember, and use that as the platform to take another step and another step. And each moment is the acceptance of the experience, and always choosing to remember that knowledge is knowledge that builds upon the platform to rise us all higher and further.
Very, very much so. Very brilliant way of putting it. And I believe they even we all concluded on that term, forgive and remember, not forget. And it's because that's the extra dimensional outcome. It's unlimited, interconnected, continuing, expanding pattern, instead of repeating, whereas repeating is, okay, Mario, whatever, Super Mario, and we get to level whatever, then we press the reset button and start all over. That's repeating. No matter how far it goes, it continues to repeat. It's ultimately, if it's based on finite principles, you'll play the game so much, well, people know the game how to play blindfolded. It's like, well, life can't be that way. It's infinite. So there's always learning. It's always continuing. So creating that repetition pattern is not the real thing. The expanding pattern is that trinary pattern, and it is something that leads to, like you said, the next step after the next step, which I kind of lost my idea of how it works, but it's a higher dimensional. Well, that's why it's higher dimensional, and I don't know why, because I'm not going to point out the fractals of degrees and angles that produce this shape, because that's what they map it out all in shapes and stuff like that. It's just that, well, what is one and then a zero and then one and then we got somewhere, okay, reset again, and no matter how far we go, there must be a reset. All that can do is continually create a endless pattern of repetition. The truth is, we can go on forever. We can literally go on forever. And there's always going to be something else. It's just what energy and form. So when we mesh with that, what are we going to do next? Okay, this is whatever the situation is. So what? What's next? How to continue life as we are on a high frequency that leads to an eternal awareness in the face of all these other oppositions. And yeah, so forgive and remember symbolizes that very well.
All right. So we're about 2 hours into it here. I'm totally good as far as my energy goes. I just want to check in with you personally. You go take a piss. Do you want to keep going? I mean, I've got a shitload more questions here. The in-depth conversations that are coming up and being provoked by just these single questions are, great information. And I'm really, really connected to just kind of the energy right now that's bouncing back between us and the interaction off of that. So I'm open to keep going. It's really up to you. I just wanted to check in with you personally, how you're feeling.
Yeah, I feel the secure positive channel as well.
Awesome.
And I could go to the bathroom though.
Yeah.
And as long as you think it's not just rambling nonsense, I know it's not nonsense, but I can't really predict how people are going to take this stuff because
So
it takes so many different ways.
you know what, Og, you got to step out of that and just accept yourself as the conduit here, because that is what it is. And what I feel to being of service to you is this information comes to me in a way where I digest it, and what I'm trying to do is, after big chunks of it, then kind of transmit it back to you within the dialogue, and then you verifying that. And so that way, as people listen to this, the information washes over them on a level where it's absorbed physically, but then it's condensed down and fed back to them in an auditory way of a simple concept that unites it all, So I feel like that way the information really does start to work on people, and I think that you and I have this kind of yin-yang balance in this connection right now, where there's a lot coming through you, and I'm holding a real strong space of receiving it all, and then helping kind of refine that in an individual kind of sphere of energy and putting it back out there. That's how I'm receiving it and perceiving it.
Yeah, and I think that's why this is working.
Yeah, totally.
It's like a secure channel has formed.
Yeah.
And I always used to do that to the point where I could start backwards from my conversation or answer and end up at the same point I started with, but in a new way. And it would always come out like that. And it's almost as if going back, you recapping, condensing down, me having that on my mind and everything moving from where it was in basically a respectable manner, as if it's angled in response or in respect to each other angle, as if we were making a shape. And it's like a spiral is being formed where each level, one can bounce from one level to the next, and the lines on the level will then connect from meaning from one point to the next on the different levels, as well linearly around the whole track as it goes.
Absolutely.
And that builds this big expanse picture. And that is what reality is. It's a fractal nature. And that's why the consciousness issue of all of this and the technology, it shows that. It shows big webs of diagrams, like somebody's working up a big, huge fractal reality matrix, and it's not the false one. I mean, technically it is. It's time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sacred geometrically sound, and what that means is there are there are points that line up, and they connect to like bubbles, and we have all these almost like mind wormholes where all this information floods in. And it's good.
Definitely.
I'm trying to recreate that, without trying to, and you're automatically bringing that in because the process of checking and rechecking and folding, it's doing it. It's like a flower growing. It's doing it automatically.
Definitely, and I feel that too. This is not forced at all. This feels incredibly natural. I have had some physical sensations come through. Just to kind of give you a heads up, that forgive and remember, when that kind of came in through me, and then I wrote it down right here. My entire hands up to my lips started just kind of tingling. And when I think about it in context to the full disclosure now movement and things like that, I feel like that's where I need to encapsulate that idea, because that is a big part of that movement, is basically accepting the accountability for where we're turning over our consent and being able to work with forgiveness. But that term in particular is hardwired with something, because I felt it on a real physical level.
Yeah, and it might be many things giving you that inspiration.
Yeah,
And as well, that is a very difficult topic for people to understand. So
absolutely.
it's like a hard point of where we want to connect with people to.
Are you there?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so kind of recount and start where we left off here. Can you explain what you know about the human physical body and how it serves the soul here? What how does it serve as a vessel for the soul? How does it interact here? Do you have any information on that in particular?
This is a very complex topic. It's in a way, simple. We're like a receiver for higher dimensional information. I guess I could actually go into it.
Hmm.
It's all waves and patterns and interference patterns and coalescences of harmonies, which all add up, and we call it consciousness. From what I understand, everything carbon based is most likely running off of DNA. The DNA itself contains sacred geometry patterns using elements, and basically it opens up wormholes, small interdimensional wormholes that connect to the source of time and space. And from some layer within that, there is an amount of etheric light or energy coming through that, and it is filtered into many different patterns and configurations through the physical brain and most likely the DNA. And through this, we get consciousness here in physical reality, when basically consciousness is everywhere, and as well it is sourced from a non-physical realm. And so it is not here in physical reality. It is coming here through life living beings, and then it connects to the animals. And okay, well, do they have a soul and consciousness? And yes, the same source energy is coming through, but the brain does not permit it to be self-identifying in that way a creator that we're allowed to be. Because even when people are doing this, well, they're dumber than the animals and this that. No, they're creating it for themselves. They're just dumb creators. If they create stuff that it causes them suffering. And so this ability to create and basically manifest and in that way guide or control reality, atomic reality, is sourced from, we only call, all I know is it as is a source of it as is source. And there's really no way to describe it because it's beyond times, it's beyond shapes and forms, and it's the ultimate form and time and shape that is both what everything here leads to and what everything here came from. It's the all and the only thing that can be, has been, and ever will be. And so in that same sense, well, then we're in the higher dimensional reality right now. We're in source right now. We have filters over our abilities to perceive that the soul and then the spirit behind that is animating through and looking through like a looking glass. And from that, there are configurations, and it's the way our consciousness works, and then the way the ego is set up in the conscious mind, and a personality is built from that is developed through a nature versus nurture filtration system of responses and encoded actions in the brain, and essentially how well our wave form, if you will, or the light comes through us, and how well we allow it and permit it. the thing, the one, the being that is allowing it and making the changes, that is the being, that is us. The being experiencing it, having these changes made to them, suffering through it, that is the body that is temporary. It's still us, but it is an instrument we're using to refine our true nature, which is our ability to discern and guide and create and basically know the self.
Mm. So just to kind of feed that back to you here, what I'm seeing is the human body is a vehicle for the soul to come through and do higher level work, or actually not even higher level work, to just do the existing work that's part of this natural, organic, symbiosis that we all exist in within the universe and within all of existence. And what comes across through this machine is the emotional impressions of this experience in a 3D world, and that information is then interpreted through a lens through onto the soul that's come into the world, has made soul agreements to do certain type of karmic work, to do to have certain type of actions, whether they're human based souls, whether they're star seeds. It's all relative in the way that it's just an experience. It's literally just a platform to have experience, to kind of refine the whole. And this is the relationship between the soul and the human body. Does that connect?
Yes, and there's one discrepancy, which is that I was kind of told information, and the picture was kind of painted that the soul is the memory bank for our 3.5 dimensional experiences here in a brain and body, and that so it'll go from one brain and body and then maybe another, and it's all simultaneous. But since the brain matter material is not transferred, from life to life or person to person in existence, whether it's the same concept of like reincarnation, or whether it's simultaneous interdimensional existences, this reality is not necessarily merged with another timeline or reality where I made another decision. Okay, well, how do we get deja vu then of these other timelines? And so there's a soul that exists in the space that's between. It would be the extracellular matrix, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
of cell fluid or intracellular fluid, or a bone matrix of how those structures grow. And it's very helpful to look into biology and how the body functions, because it's just a bunch of situations like these and hierarchies.
Mm.
But they're all, relevant in central holographic hierarchy. It's never top down. If it is, it's the brain and then some spirit, us controlling that. It's never like, oh, we're a cell bossing other cells around. No, everything is complete to its own level.
Mm.
And so they were basically painting the picture that the spirit is then beyond the soul. The emotional and mental information is remembered by the soul across timelines and existences. Then the spirit is basically remembered by the universe and contained by that. The mental emotional information contained by the soul, and the spirit then remembered and contained by the universe. And we become basically interconnected. The soul then interconnected, leaning towards the body, but as a midway for the spirit. And then the spirit then interconnected with the soul, which is talking to the body, and then the spirit then interconnected with the something larger, some larger aspect of the universe, which is probably a hyperspatial realm, world, or perspective where times and spaces are intertwined in a higher dimensional way, kind of like one of them floating cube gifs or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a different experience. But within that, imagine each rotation of the device, the cube or whatever the shape is, we're experiencing lifetimes worth of energy at once. So it's beyond what we can imagine. In the same way, it's just another spiral of the same expanding pattern, but again, it's an expansion trinary pattern. So then you can zoom in and out of the fractal indefinitely. You'll never have a loss of information. It'll only continue.
And
And so
again,
it's a
go
very
ahead.
expansive experience.
And again, to go kind of to loop back around, this aligns with the idea of cellular memory, and also the idea of these akashic records, and us being able to have access to all experience, from an internal level, if we do the work and refine ourselves enough to be able to hone in and access that stuff. But within all of us, within our DNA, within that space where the soul exists, that information is accessible to all of us, correct?
Yeah, and I think that might be I mean, that's again, brilliant way of putting it. I think that might be what soul is.
Mm.
The DNA and the genetic information, it's stored within, not in the brain, like, oh, my memories are here. They bounced out of one realm to the next. In the DNA, it's transcommunicating between dimensions, and our cells hold this knowledge, this light knowledge, or this whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
They hold it, and we can tap into it. And when we become aware of more and more dimensions and selves and times. So that means we're going to become aware of the trauma that's holding us back. It's like a balloon expanding with a belt on or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hand in hand with that process of waking up, of kicking out the rigid containment systems that are perceivably holding things back. I wanted to say something else, but I forgot it now.
Okay.
I should have remembered.
Do you want to take a second to see if it comes back, or move on?
Do you remember what you just said to spark it?
It was basically around cellular memory and also the Akashic records, that all of this stuff lives inside us.
Okay. So how I was saying, there's one side and the other, Ascension Tech. So they have these tablets and these devices, computers that you mind interface with it, and now you're getting 200,000 years of information, up to millions of years.
And
And
you're
people,
talking about glass tablets, like glass pads?
they reverse engineered them or created their own to meet up with that technology, and they're not as sincere as the. Basically, people would hit the tablets and go insane.
Gotcha.
So they reverse engineered it and filtered it through a system. So now you only get what your brain can handle. It's a governor system. And again, then it's, I was going to say you might only get 1,000 years at a time, because now the tablets and all that, they do that. It is beyond comprehension. It is beyond comprehension. But then you have some guy in India, dreaded and smells like cow poop,
Mm-hmm.
smoking weed,
Mm-hmm.
and he's tapping into the same records. Like, oh yeah, 2 million years ago this happened, and the solar thing here, and the dragon in the sky there, and yeah, and then this happened. And, well, he doesn't have a glass tablet. How is he doing it? He's connecting with, most likely, the other version, the real, well, not real, but just the different version, the soul version, which is the Akashic records.
Mm-hmm.
And you see how they both is the Akashic mimicking the smart glass, or are these tablets and the smart glass, is that mimicking the Akasha? It's the same. Neither is mimicking one another. They're all heading towards that pinnacle of ultimate knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And so when you're talking about a sadhu, somebody in India, or whatever, so an enlightened being able to tap into the Akashic records, essentially somebody in the SSP, or somebody that's accessing technology that's around the same thing, it's all going the same direction. Even though these are two vastly different things on the spectrum of life and energy, they're essentially unified in the way that they're going the same direction and producing the same outcome. Correct?
With the organic tech, especially these, what they said were left from previous civilizations, very much so, yes. With the purely transhumanistic, born out of fear, desire to stay alive through technology view, that tends to lead into another ego realm created by that, manifested out of the universe for the soul, to their spirit, or whatever it is, to probably the soul, to experience and work through on its own. If we keep the trinary system and don't base everything off of fear, and it's not necessarily fear, because a lot of people based it on, well, I'm trying to save the world, and now death is no longer a problem. And out of that, create many problems that stop us from reaching the natural ascension, which yields eternity and no death. And so that's the main thing, that both reach towards eternity. One, with the tech, will create a shortcut to immortality, which then creates necessity of challenges in the form of catalysts, because it basically removes the natural problems that we have that push us to go within. You see, so it then created a delay now with the eventual reuniting of the material and etheric forms in eternity. And so then the ascension route, organic ascension, there is just pure discipline. There's many ways to describe it. It is as well filled with gnosis and the shapes and angles and the processes. There's many sacred processes that don't use technology. And it yields it basically without a delay. We would say it takes longer in the universe, because this guy's over here, he just plugged into a machine and now he's eternal or immortal at that point. Okay, well, now the heart trinary aspect has to be encoded in the binary aspect, and since it can't be, you have to superimpose that using your consciousness and then translocate yourself into the outside realm of the machine and burst through it, because it became a trap system now, you see.
Yeah.
Then they're looking at the guy, the yogi, like it's going to take him 60 years and then he's still going to die anyway. Meanwhile, that yogi might live that life, or a few others, or whatever, however you want to call it. Maybe it's just that life, and he dies and goes directly to the internal.
Yeah, it's all relative. Yeah, I definitely feel you. Okay, can you talk about what capabilities of the human body are starting to come online right now, and what ways people can nurture and enhance these abilities?
There's a lot talked about that. There's a lot of pollution with the waves going around. They were saying that, with the little conversion point, the waves become psychic waves basically, and everyone can see now, because there's a big Wi-Fi Ethernet everywhere around of soul information, around there, or more so just neuronal psychic information around the net, or the plane net. And of course that brings up all these other timeline issues and whatnot, but people just have to be prepared. But what really is happening is they said that the internet is transferring information on a emotional, mental level now through people's monitors and laptops and computers, that people are both going to get more angry at people through these new introductions, as well. People are going to be able to connect with each other and really communicate with each other in a way that goes beyond any other points in history. And naturally, psychic abilities are increasing. The ability to comprehend these issues is going to increase. Basically, our IQ is going to increase. Everything else is as it has been, and it seems, and its physical bodies acting the same, but in an increased level of self-awareness, and interacting similarly, but increased in more self-awareness. And we're going to see a point, which we may be beginning to see now, where the DNA is going to begin to rewrite itself to match the awareness, the incoming awareness of the humans on the planet. Because the whole thing, just like we're a big harmony of coalescences of vibrations and frequencies that merge all into this one shell outside of our body, and we go, oh, that's me, that's my awareness. The earth is like that as well. And so when more and more people come to that awareness, the overall vibration, the overall unified field will shift. And when we're apparently at the point where everything is increasing because of these things, because we hit a majority point. We passed critical point. And that's why everything is kind of like this big, masterful orchestra where it must be timed, because, well, now that we're at critical point, well, that means the weight can go either way. We could ascend, or we could push into a delusional state. But then it's like one of those games or something where, like, don't waste your time playing games. But there's computer games where it's like you balance the board across a centerpiece or something, and you kind of got to move the mouse around. It's as if that's happening, and every time it leans to one side, these events are going to be happening like they already have been, to balance it and keep it moving in the side that it is supposed to, which is basically towards a viable temporal existence. Okay. The lower realms, physical realm, may become any reality. The highest is that people are going to merge with eternity. What the middle is, which is what Earth is the middle between one spectrum spark in the universe and one other spark in hyperspace, and we're that trans-dimensional flux of the two fields meeting in the middle, and that interference pattern is what we call physical matter. That's going to be, if it's all according to self-awareness increasing, the social structures will change and kind of dissolve and melt away, like I was saying before. Monetary systems and a community-styled society. Honestly, people are going to get a lot of emotions. The awareness increases. Basically, this is what we talked about in the situations. What happens when one person goes through that? When they, put them in the ascension device, because it's called a ascension device. Well, they go crazy. They just almost pull their hair out. They're like, what are these things coming up to me trying to basically pull me into their realities? So, and it's not, again, it doesn't, they said it didn't have to be that way because that's, a big deal for everyone to go through, although it could be, but if it does go that way, there are people in place to balance that out. But people they go loopy, they go kind of crazy. They get emotional, people fight, people cry. So for those that are not watching the center of the self, as we're being bombarded with stuff trying to knock us off center, that's how they're going to feel. And it will be connected directly to this crumbling system. And you can imagine that's going to be the catalyst to allow these people to change. Instead of, there is no system, we're all out here living in utopia, and then all of a sudden everybody just starts punching each other in the face. Yeah. That would be more strange or inexplicable than if we have a crappy system. Imagine the system was invented. Everybody, let everybody go. It would just be whatever. But this still would have to happen because people developed unawareness. So they developed this fake system to light on fire, burn, run over, crash, rip apart, and everybody gets this cathartic experience of watching why they feel the way they do play out and get it out of their system and get rid of it and accept it. And so with those that are aware, they're going to probably get more awareness around the world of these issues, of these changes. And from there, there are plenty of phenomena, psychic phenomena and interdimensional. Most of it is controlled. It's literally technology, or even soul technology. So I don't mean like ghosts and things like that, but basically spiritual ascension and awakening, where the trauma comes to the surface, the bodies tend to mesh, and we get glimpses into the beyond, and many things happen with that. It's really not, it's indescribable, but when these things happen and we see more awareness playing out, we see more people talking about these things, we'll know that they're going through the same issues, the same thing, it's the same experiences. It's not an issue or thing, it's an experience of life.
And it's naturally part of what's going on right now, just within what we're all experiencing and co-creating together. It's a natural effect of that, correct?
Yes, and again, imagine that it could be it could be distorted.
Yeah, definitely.
But it could be accelerated. So you see a technological enhancement to the natural process, and it's, well, what does that equal? It's whatever we make of it.
So what are the ways that people what can they do to assist each other in this time of transformation right now?
It goes back to sharing knowledge of everybody that has an inkling of a suspicion that something is going on, connecting and speaking out, talking to each other. That goes down to fear and alchemical transformation, and that if anybody isn't paying attention, well, guess what? It's because they're afraid of the truth. If anybody isn't knowing that these events hurt the earth and that they're hurting the earth, or they're hurting somebody else, well, guess what? It's because some part of them wants to do that, and they don't care. They want to see that end come about. So facing that is one of the biggest deals with that, biggest situations, is facing the shadow consciousness. So that's like, but how do you play that out? People have been trained for thousands of years to handle this task for humanity. So what we could do is look for the signs, the knowledge, as well as create them and take part in that sacred geometrical expression and expansion of this knowledge in society, in articles or videos or anything you can imagine, because those are limited articles or videos, that's just on a computer. What would we do if we all were given an incentive, a tax break, to go out and make friends and find our soul energy and our self-awareness? People will do something. So, and again, we are capable of anything. Because you can sit here and go, okay, well, what if, imagine 1 million people right now went out of this tax break, 50% tax break, if we go out and teach someone about the self-awareness within, or spend 3 hours trying to create that within ourselves and then express it on the internet or in a social, anywhere, What would that look like? We can backwards engineer, if you will, deduct that, or find it through deduction, because we would know it would not be fighting. It would not be a lot of what we see today. It would not be outward materialistic motivations and actions. And from there, we could kind of question, does that mean that we reduce and reverse what we're seeing today and work through that? The first thing aware people do in an unaware world is remove the aspects that keep everybody unaware. Or as well, introduce the aspects of awareness. And so again, it's all entangled and tied together in this unified expansion of the self. And there's many ways to answer that. It could be art. How do you express yourself? How do you do that? Ultimately, what it really does come down to, there's only one guy on YouTube talking about this right now, breaking through the veils and all that, is that we all have to know ourselves and find ourselves to know the universe, know how consciousness can become distorted, how it's refractory and reflective and interdimensionally so from a higher level, meaning the mirrors then are entire realms of materiality. It's not just a mirror that you turn around from.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, learn the keys to discernment of how we're going to be telling what is foreign in our environment, in our consciousness spectrum, and what is an aspect of ourselves. And I said that before. In reality, everything is the aspect of the self. But what is a simulation of the center, i.e., a mirror out in front of you pretending it's the real reality? And then what is actually the center, the real center of you? So everyone will find that and go through that in that process. And it will most likely be accelerated by events, by unveilings. And that's what I was told. I could see that happening. I could see it going on a little bit longer. But because I don't want to say there's going to be big events that are going to happen that help unveil this, because, well, could that be something shocking, by intention of these individuals? Or maybe even, well, are people ready for that? Is that going to be too shocking alone? And they just give us the calm, gentle truth and people can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's going to happen where people can't handle it. But we're going to see a shifting of that. And I guess the best thing we could do is people who are attached mentally and connected to this dissolving system of politics, media, drama, essentially war with the self, war with each other, war with ideas, war with identities, war with the environment, gently, metaphorically tap them on the shoulder and introduce them to the other aspect of the landscape of the world, have them gaze over at the un-chemtrail filtered sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And these things have to be done, basically. Those that are basically, they're entranced, like zombies. It's
Yeah.
the zombie apocalypse is right now. We're in the middle of it. They're entranced into that. So we have to wake ourselves up enough to the point where we can wake each other up, to the point where we can wake up those who are entranced inside the machine.
Definitely. And so, kind of to feed that back to you again here, what I'm hearing is the opportunity again for the people that are conscious right now and waking up and understanding these things, researching these things on an outward level, but also on an inward level where this information kind of touches with inside them and opens up things to them. Again, the responsibility, if you're interested in really kind of changing the paradigm of this world and really kind of creating a timeline together that's an organic timeline based through inspiration and intuition, is to go out and start connecting again with real people and to follow your intuition. And when you meet with people or have random quote unquote coincidental meetings or interactions with people, to listen to your intuition. And if there is something that comes up, to probe deeper within dialogue, and there are openings that happen with small subjects, even like talking about your coffee's too hot. That's an opportunity to start a dialogue with somebody there and to continually to lead that road of your own intuition and your own desire to give back to the community this information and to inspire others. You keep rolling with that. You keep working with people. You keep having interactions that are deeper. The intention around it is to get rid of the small talk and really go deeper, and use it as an opportunity to refine yourself out in the real world. Again, you're working on people, but they're also working on you, and it's this ping pong back and forth, and you're both serving each other. Some people are at certain levels of understanding, some people are at other levels of understanding, but it's all of service to each other. And really the commitment to it is to be compassionate to somebody. The best opportunity for you to refine your compassion is with somebody who is absolutely, completely closed down to the ideas that you're offering. Where do you find yourself, in a need of having to define or, be right in your dialogue? How do you rid yourself of that? The opportunity is to accept somebody else's experience there and to work with them in compassion. And I've said, multiple times that the idea is that you share out into the world about, the reality of what's going on may just break some people's hearts. This information is so heavy and so completely shattering to people's, reality bubbles, that you have to walk with grace and care as you're doing it, and compassion, and it's a great journey to be able to do that. That's the path of the light warrior. That's the path of the peaceful warrior, to be able to refine yourself in that process, to refine those parts of compassion and unconditional love that is needed in this world right now, to kind of really co-create a beautiful manifestation of that next life, that golden age, or whatever you want to call it.
Very much so. Um, Basically, exactly like you say it. Not exactly, but it's great the way you word it. Um, I kind of even take notes from you, taking notes. And it does come down to, as you're saying, a responsibility. That when all that comes out, what are we doing? Well, we're actively interacting with and taking responsibility for the world that everybody sits back and goes, oh, it's messed up, we'll do something later. Somebody will vote for somebody. That is actively taking responsibility for it.
Totally.
And it's basically going out with the idea of co-creation, inspiration, and intuition, using the higher self to follow intuition and higher awareness patterns of consciousness in the brain, to not give in to the lower binary emotional fight or flight responses from the lower brain functions. And ultimately, we have to use the higher brain and accelerate our awareness into higher consciousness, and move beyond duality, which is the system we're in now. And then, or I guess the paper system, the false system, was all written down and constructed, that doesn't ever exist, is the duality system of, controls and commands. And it's kind of like creating from lines and segments and linear patterning, binary patterning. It's kind of like creating a spiral of fractal awareness from that, of expansion and awareness. And of course, then the lower desires, the distractions, the shortcutting frequencies, resets, and imitations of the real through these false realities, they come out from that. And so we have to be aware of that and work with that. And then you move on and tie it together when you say, because this is kind of what you said, that it goes back to the heart. We take responsibility, we go through these things, and we realize that it's the heart that is going to be challenged by these things.
Yeah.
And it's all about compassion and refining and learning and attempting to do that. And ultimately, that's going to be ridding ourselves of fear, because we can talk to these other people, we can have ourselves. The only way somebody else could attempt, could distort us, is if we didn't truly believe in ourselves and have confidence in ourselves. And there was some point of fear where we're like, maybe it's, not the way it really is. We need to get rid of that. And if we did, we wouldn't have any problem communicating.
Yeah.
And be an enabler for higher consciousness, not lower consciousness. And it is people's hearts that are going to be taking this. It's the heart that is going to be weighted by this, because when the mind gets overwhelmed, sure, things get loopy, it gets confused. But when the heart gets overwhelmed, it closes off.
Yeah.
And the heart is basically the life force of our soul, or our spirit level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like everything that you just said. It's all within that.
Right on. Very cool. So can we talk about, where does substances being put into the body affect this type of work? Especially particularly street drugs and pharmaceuticals is kind of what I'm getting to at this.
With psychedelics taken in a mastery format, meaning you didn't, the person didn't just take them. Mm-hmm. Somebody basically that's been doing it with their family or in their tribe or however that works, mm-hmm. and knows the process to go through, where it's like going into death. That is useful for breaking the distortions and connecting with a multitude of simultaneity of higher dimensional awareness in one. It's, like going from the linear time scale to now there's expanse cycles beyond that. And apparently the toxins, additives, hormones, preservatives, mm-hmm. animal DNA, especially certain types of animal DNA, street drugs, serotonin depleting drugs, mm-hmm. endorphin depleting drugs, from cocaine being like alcohol, I think related to one of the survival nature nurture instincts, mm-hmm. and people that were maybe neglected as a child or as an infant and didn't develop that first security often fall into those patterns of addiction that affect it's actually the opiates and and alcohol, the
Alcohol.
depressants that
Yeah.
do that, and then the other one, like a psycho-spiritual level, gets activated, and that wasn't activated enough on its own. People then get caught into cocaine or something like that, which then
Methamphetamines. Yeah, totally.
exactly, and these actually act as portals for other consciousness.
Hmm.
So when we connect with ourselves by using things like that, just like the ritual, the psychedelic plants, the shamanic ceremonial plants. They say, well, this is a teacher, this is a portal to another world. It's the same with these other substances, and so people doing that they're gonna distort their process. That will lead one into, for the majority of it, suffering. Ironically, there are a lot of people in the celebrities and the bases and stuff like that that use substances like that, and not experimenting on the children or the teens or adults in there. Although there is meth experiments, LSD, all that stuff, and the psychedelics are actually used to look into someone's mind and pull out distortion. But it's all technical now, whereas vibration beams, they don't you don't actually have to take anything. It's basically, it's no longer chemicals. They can take the soul out of the body, and it's not like the body dies. It's like it's frozen in time, and then you're now walking around in temporal space. And so we can go through the veils and dimensions using that. Whereas, before that, they would use psychedelics, and everybody, the shamans and all the tribes and things like that, they use the psychedelics for that, as well as chanting, and it's all it is concentration. It takes concentration, and will achieve that. And then a lot of them are on meth. The basically the people behind the scenes that tend to be partying in those bases, those situations, as some of the whistleblowers describe. A lot of them are on meth and coke all the time. So it's a weird situation. But with that said, I'm not trying to put anybody down or give them a bad trip, but being on those chemicals it'll cause suffering.
Yeah.
It's happening, like I said, because some nurture aspect wasn't reached in
Yeah.
childhood, and now there's a hole that wants to be filled, a lack, and substances create the illusion, the image of that, and it's not real.
Mm.
It creates a more repetitive cycle until there's no more energy left.
Can you talk about THC in particular, and the way what I find interesting is that the legalization that's happening within the United States, within Colorado and Oregon and Washington, and most likely California next, is that there is a culture that's starting to definitely accept use of cannabis on all different types of levels. Medicinal, psychoactive, recreational. What is the effect of THC on the consciousness, in your opinion?
So the medicinals and liquids that could benefit people that are being poisoned by the system, ironically, if the system wasn't here, that's now parading around allowing this as if it's like Mr. Savior, people wouldn't have these problems to begin with. You just juice, natural organic. Oh wow, there's no disease. Look at that. With the bioflavonoid, very absorptive and efficient vitamins that are found in bioavailable in juices and fruits and stuff, but fresh squeezed, like homemade. And to the point where Gerson and all that talked about healing disease, cancer. Weston A. Price went to these third world countries, and it's like, oh, they don't have tooth decay, heart disease, insanity, cancer. What are they? Oh, they just eat normal stuff. Meanwhile, the same people, oh, I go to my doctor, I do this, that, and the other, they're dying. Okay, crazy. But Weston A. Price found that out. It's amazing. Nobody knows. You look at him, Weston A. Price, and you see a bunch of pictures of him going around third world countries and looking at their teeth, their dental structure, their bone structure, their immune system. They're all in brilliant health compared to every Westerner you could pill. Even the people now, perfect teeth, perfect skin in New York. Well, look at their liver. Look at their kidneys. I guarantee you, look at their lungs. I guarantee you it's not clean. So, and so with that said, it's interesting that it's coming out now with all these big things, poisons. I do remember something about cannabis being used to change the world. That's why it may be here. It may be here in some kind of involvement with a higher race, a higher dimensional race, like certain myths and legends talk about, mainly with the Dogon tribe. Is it the Dagon? Yeah. I guess Dogon. And then there's marijuana being made legal everywhere, and so people are gonna change their consciousness. The one good thing about that is they're gonna change their consciousness. All the people that saw the law as one way, they're gonna slowly see the law go the complete other way. That could play out, yes, into this like, transhumanist, transgender, transhumanistic, trans desire, free for all system. But again, if humanity is pure, hopefully that wouldn't mean, wait, they make the laws so we can do anything and everybody starts, molesting and killing each other. Well, that means that the laws aren't only thing wrong. People have a problem with them, that they need to work out. And so we're going to get a chance to work all these things out and really control ourselves because the system's going to let go.
Mm.
And so the only thing, THC to a person who's waking up will open other chakras, will expand their mind. To somebody who smokes weed, it'll make them relaxed. And so it can be used, but I wouldn't recommend people using it unless they're using it kind of like Terrence McKenna said, where it's like once a week and the largest amount you can get, biggest bong or something one person can find, cross-legged in a dark room, closed door, silence, meditating the whole time. Like that's what it would be
Yeah,
for.
totally.
Unless there's other experiences where the person incorporates that.
And so, on that level with THC and on that topic there, I've heard from multiple kind of insiders that have been part of Clean Slate technology that THC actually helped to break down some of that programming. Is that something that you know anything about?
Yeah, I was going to get to that. The THC relaxes a person in these experiences and does break down programming to the point. Basically, when we get into the face of fear and we can make a joke and chuckle at it, it completely breaks the whole. It's literally like, I don't know, it takes the steam away from the bully or something.
Mm.
Okay. Like we reflect that into a waveform that's sentient and artificial, unaware, unself-aware, non-self-aware, and attempting to coerce us using fear, and we laugh in its face. It doesn't know what to do. It just gets a big error sign. It doesn't know what to do.
Mm.
So, and that's borderline love.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is something about the chemtrails and the GMO marijuana coming out now, and how that could be related to programming and kind of pulling people into that system. Although if a person is awake, it shouldn't matter anyway because the chemtrails are everywhere and these systems are everywhere, and so we're going to be hit with it regardless. But they're getting everybody with that.
Mm-hmm.
It could look like everybody's going to be stoned and relaxed, and apocalyptic events will play out, and people will be relaxed enough to not freak out entirely because the system we see today will be so different that those who are most in tune with these vibrations, so to speak, will be, I guess they'll have access to what they need to balance and harmonize themselves.
Mm.
Will it add up to that? I don't know. What will happen to the older people that aren't, part of that generation? Are they going to get trapped in it? I don't know. I would say there would be another situation for them to find the truth in themselves.
When you were talking right now, you mentioned laughter as a way to kind of break through and basically create an error within that system. And I'm going to go off topic here because it's leading this way, and I want to say this. You had mentioned before, I believe, in an interview around the Hollywood characters. They're particularly interested in comedians, and one thing that I've always gravitated to is that I've always looked at comedians as almost like shamans in a way, that they have this incredible power to take divisive topics that people don't want to talk about, things that are hidden in the shadows that have all of this energy because of that, and they bring them out into the light, and then they transmute them through humor. And to me, people like Bill Hicks or George Carlin or even Louis C.K. to an extent now these days, these people, I've always viewed them as these shamans where they're doing a serious type of work on a layer of helping us unwind all of this garbage and to kind of take the power out of keeping these things hidden, and to take the power out of just different types of social contexts that lock you into not talking about certain topics. And so does that tie into the reason why they want these type of characters is because of that power? Does that align at all with any of your thinking?
That's a possibility.
Uh-huh.
And as well, maybe they're manipulating and controlling things so that it leads to something positive.
Uh-huh. Definitely.
But art always gives that expression the expression can only always be interpreted a variety of ways, and it can be, instead of linear words, this is exactly what it means. This is, an art expression, a stand-up, a musical flow, a painting, and what does he really mean there? And it can be interpreted in a variety of ways, and therefore it is like hyperlearning, it's hyperacceleration. You can cut through the rigidity of it, and ultimately it works when the comedian takes the darkness and makes it funny, and he basically sees the truth where there are lies, and then puts it in a way that's ironic. And what really is ironic and humor in that is when things kind of line up in a way that makes sense but don't make sense at the same time. Like we don't really know what's going on. That's basically how a fractal higher dimensional consciousness works, where we're in a situation that makes sense, but we can't see the overall picture unless it's expressed in a certain way that basically supersedes the preconceived notions that we attained to get to where we are physically, materially here.
Definitely.
So introducing that humor is basically introducing a higher perspective. Like, this isn't really happening. They're lying. This is why they're doing it, and look what they're doing over here. It's a big joke.
Yeah,
definitely. It's a way of exposing the truth.
Yeah. Okay, so when we talked last time, you had talked about some work that you were doing prior to 2010, and what I kind of wanted to talk to you about was that work in particular. Can you talk about the work you were doing prior to 2010 on an internal level? The terms that you used, I think, were a guide to ascension or something to that extent.
So I went through a lot of these other dimensional experiences when I was before age of 15, and then there's a lot of they're monitoring and stuff like that. And when I was 18, I pretty much kind of gone my own way and forgot about a lot of things, but I always kept the spiritual nature. I was juicing, very active. And I almost dreamt of like becoming a yogi and just being like, all right, this is the world. I'm gonna go over here in this desert and just meditate. And they kind of informed me, that's not what the world needs. You can benefit the world better. And that happened, of course, in a variety of ways, because when somebody tries to tell you and you don't even know where it's coming from, most people just go, F off, I don't know you, whatever. You don't know me, when they know more than we can imagine. And so that led to a lot of situations where I was basically handled, which became like a nightmare situation. But as well, that gave me the fuel to push through from that darkest place, to push through what later was presented as the veils placed over reality. And these are like dimensional occlusion systems that it kind of basically trapped our consciousness for millions of years. And when we combine the bodies, we gain millions of years of experience in one. And we have to be prepared for that because it's everything we see. And so, I was getting handled from about 18 to 20 years old. Well, 23. And at 20, I reached my awakening. And I must have remembered all the trauma because that's all I talked about and said, and I talked to no one. I would just like put posts out on that, or I would tell people that are in like positions of power, like, this is going on, you need to effing pay attention to that. And I had forgot about all the travel experiences, the high technology, I thought it was just, like a mafia group, which a lot of times you can describe it as that, but it's much more. And if there's a good aspect, aside from that out of control kind of looking group, well, then they can't definitely be looked at like a mafia. They're just there.
Yeah.
In 2010, I reached the awakening. I was 20, and I saw all of this. They broke down the veils. We went to examine various future possibilities, and they learned from us handling it, and was given a decision to try to help people by telling the world. And so here I am. I would assume I'm helping by telling the world, because I forever, get this, I thought 14, 13, 12 years old, I thought everybody did this. They just didn't know how to talk about it, because I would ask people, well, do you have dreams, or what do you think about the soul and death and light and time and space and the limits and simulation and beyond? and they would get a bit of it and then be like, well, I don't really know. So I'd be like, oh, well, you don't know how to describe that experience that I just had, and in a few years you'll learn how to describe it.
Mm,
Sooner or later, I realized no one had those experiences. No one does, and if they do, they don't remember them.
mm,
That temporal realm in the mind.
mhm,
You can get people to experience it though. You can get them to tap into it and see these other dimensions were existing in simultaneously all at once.
mm,
That's what happened. They showed me those other dimensions. They combined my bodies. There was an ascension device. There was extremely high technology. There was the veils over humanity. There was the realm gatekeepers that go along with each veil, the intrusion consciousness that kind of worked its way into the shell of our little organic universe here. And the work that led me up to that honestly took place when I was, I guess, 10, 11, 12 years old, where I began keeping a few journals that basically describe everything that I'm trying to talk about now,
mm,
which is as strange as it is. And honestly, it went far beyond that because there's stuff in there that I can't even comprehend and I'm
mm,
getting out of my memory. But it was about duality and transcending it and basically the shape of the universe and the waveforms and duality and what it looks like and how a linear positive and negative side kind of be like a volume symbol where it starts small as a point, then expands into bars that get larger as it goes, and it can be seen. That could be basically that's like a spiral looked at from another perspective, and a spiral from another perspective is basically like a semicircle, kind of like DNA from another perspective. So in reality, we're going through spirals of consciousness, like in a 360-degree view from a center point, looking out, and we're when the right notes are hit, the right keys, we basically ascend to different circles, to different spirals in that spiral, and through that we get expansion of consciousness. We get from one level or loop to another, and there's just spirals within spirals. But I was breaking down consciousness and time in our perception of it with the linear mind, the analytical mind, to the transcendent emotional, and trying to basically build a pathway into the eternal, merging the linear. And sure enough, that's what the secret societies and the ancient Gnosis societies have been doing this entire time. So I guess it was leaking out of my memory.
mm. And in 2010, they put an active stop to that. Is the idea?
Well, that was me learning and me figuring things out.
Mm-hmm.
What came to an end from what they told me was the underground projects, the underground bases. They said the research projects were ended then, and that some people that are experiencing it now are actually basically being brought through time, and it's happening in the past. It doesn't really make sense, but it's kind of how it is.
Interesting.
And so they said, yeah, the hands are off the controls. There were an elder group. Well, not an elder. There are elders, and then there's basically those are the highest, and then there's basically the Illuminati
Mm-hmm.
and the royal the bloodlines. And so
Mm-hmm.
they said that their contract for humanity is up with the ending of the Federal Reserve around that time. Contracts up, and so they don't have right to interact with humanity anymore.
Mm.
But now there are other groups involved keeping this perpetuated until humanity is ready to basically ascend. You could say we're just gonna throw the system off. We're gonna have no need for money. We're gonna work like Michael Tellinger says for 3 hours a week, and with 5,000 people, well, you can make the same amount in 1 year that we would make in 31 years in a capitalist economy like we are now, working 40 hours a week. Well, at that point, okay, we have everything we want. Well, I guarantee you, once we do that, our spirits are going to begin to ascend. Our minds are going to expand in ways we can't imagine.
Mm.
We're going to know things. And so that's basically what we're apparently in the works for now. And the people that are in control are managing that aspect of it. And the true gang stalkers in the Illuminati is no longer performing that role, that their hands are off. But the generators are running because they will feed until we stop feeding them. So again, it's like this big spiral of a paradox of learning and what has to happen with what we can't do until that happens yet, and us making it happen and making it so by not forcing it, but by not pushing stuff around, but by pulling out the self-awareness from within us.
Mm.
And that they describe that's the part of the project, but the process we're in, that we're in the waking up process now.
So people like just to kind of go back on the underground base stuff here, people like Donald Marshall, that are actively talking about this stuff, past 2010, the idea that that this is time travel, that somewhere previous to 2010, they're jumping forward in time and grabbing celebrities, grabbing people, and bringing them into these bases to to kind of do the same shit that they do, to kids and all of that.
Kind of. A lot of people that are there might not be many people experiencing it now.
Mm-hmm.
I even met some people that I thought died as a child, young, and they're apparently not dead and okay. So I
Wow.
don't know,
Interesting.
but like it's just a process they're putting everyone through.
Mm.
And it's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
Um, and but apparently the celebrities that are involved are basically not who we think they are. I have recollections of basically part of the program with the travel, the temporal manipulation, temporal relocation or translocation. It involved a lot of people. A lot of these people became familiar faces. They are a lot of celebrities we know today in the world that were basically initiated into this from another timeline, and now they're here basically experiencing life with humanity.
Mm.
It could be because those that give negative vibrations are from the negative timeline, and they're trying to bring that
Mm.
reality about. And then the
Interesting.
others that are coming through as star children or crystal children or empaths or whatever
Mm-hmm.
you want to call it
Mm-hmm.
are from a organic ascension timeline, and they're coming through like waves of reality undulating backwards through time in higher dimension.
Mm.
Because time could flow both forwards and backwards depending on your perspective, your phase shift,
Mm-hmm.
and the same thing is happening. But a lot of them I recognize from another society, from another timeline.
Mm. Interesting. And you think that they're trying to come over here with the intentions to escape that timeline or the intentions to change this timeline?
I think it became I think it became both.
Mm.
That instead of escape that or change this one to make it equal that, it's now F that. We're gonna make an entirely new timeline the universe has never seen before, and it's gonna be harmonized with the universe.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And there was talk of other beings, and then there were other beings present, but I didn't get enough. That doesn't make sense because I didn't. How would you tell if it's a simulator or if it's a real being?
Mm-hmm.
And if you just went through a simulator training that basically was like, any experience could be, created through that. And then these beings come out and it's like, oh, these are, whatever. How do you know if it's not a trick? But there were other beings and they have their own existence and their own everything. And the Illuminati did say that they were in contract with with those beings, not the Watchers, but the ones who are actually in charge. I did speak to some of these beings, and these are the reptilian people are actually they're the safest ones out of all of the these demigod gatekeeper beings that are standing in our way. Because they're organic, we can learn from it by
Mm-hmm.
not taking part in a fight or flight emotional lower brain eat sleep sex response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we can learn from that. We also learn from the other things, but then we learn in a more refined area. Well, now not just, oh, these lower vibrations, that's not me, this is me, down to, oh, this entire simulated reality is unreal because of these inherent missing qualities of space and time and the elements of construction or of existence of nature, and this is the way out. Each level teaches us more and more about reality until it's just like we see eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we become eternal.
Mm.
But those beings, at least the one I mentioned, or the one I was, mentioned and the one I was with, they claimed, just like the Illuminati, that the hands are off. It's up to people to decide now. No one's oppressing anyone at this point.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm gonna kind of jump to a section of questions here that I had set aside that a friend that I work with to had asked me to ask you here. Um, a very clear message was given to me that, quote unquote, the will of any ET based organization had no jurisdiction on Earth. Um, that ayahuasca, in particular, was part of a collective spiritual consciousness that was here to guide the Earth, and that any ET interference was only in power because of, on some level, the Earth based human collective at some point had allowed or consented to their interference. Does any of that ring true for you?
That was all discussed. Yes. Um, that was the quarantine I mentioned earlier.
Mm.
That no more games basically,
Hmm.
which is kind of embarrassing because now you see it's people.
Yeah, totally.
um, and but that's it.
Yeah.
People come down, we hold court. Well, they did all this stuff to us. Well, when they let you go, you just did the same thing to yourself, and to the point where you're here. So it's really up to us now to break that illusion of false power that we have to give our power away. To give the power away, we have to first have the power to give. So,
Hmm.
we that means we have the power in the first place.
Hmm.
And beings can't do stuff without the power that we give them, meaning they don't actually have power over us.
Definitely.
Um, but yeah, and the beings that are here, like, and then ayahuasca being a like a natural consciousness, almost an elemental consciousness, but not quite, more advanced than that. Not it's actually a being, probably in higher dimensional space.
Hmm.
That for things like that to still exist, to be here, they're ingrained in our natural consciousness and the consciousness of the planet. We now have the tools that the planet left for us, and we have a clear path without any interference other than that which is already pre-programmed inside of our minds.
Mm.
So again, it's just one stage reality to the next, but each time it's going to get more and more close, more and more tighter to focusing on the self, on realizing the self and the true awareness within, and it'll play out in these little reality games.
Hmm. So consent and agreement appear to be a powerful loophole for the interference of one's will upon another. Once consent has been given, is there a way to rescind or retract that consent?
Yeah, I thought I brought this up earlier, but that is one of the things you got me to think about.
Hmm.
Apparently, consent is the only law pertaining to freedom, free will, right in the universe. There is no, oh, they're people, you can't do that to them. They're people. Oh, that's a whoever, you can't do that to him, he's this. That none of that actually exists. It's only, did he allow you to? Or she, did they consent? Did they, in their free will and their ability to create, to emit, and to communicate through their actions and their thought emissions and their biology and everything, did they send you the message that they allow that, or did they say, no, I won't take part in that, that's not part of my reality, those frequencies, the spectrum, those actions, those beliefs, that's not part of my reality. So what it comes down to is we have to state our lack of consent, that we don't agree with the system, that we don't agree with the deception, that the deception system, all of that, we don't agree with the material system that's been used against the people, and that we serve our power, and that we have to actually, then the other part of that, we have to live by it. That if we say, I do not consent to being bombed and sent to war or poisoned and have stuff sprayed on me and used as food sources, and then they go out and bomb their crops with their harmful GMO crops with destructive DNA damaging glycophosphates, and then they go beat their wife or something like that and poorly slaughter their animal. And again, I don't think eating animals at any rate will be considered a higher dimensional aspect. At that point, they're basically saying, I don't want you to do all these things, but since I do it, I really have no right to say yes or no. That's what that means in higher dimensional sense and to other beings in the universe. So we have to state our lack of consent and then realize what we're doing and what actions, what our beliefs, what messages they're sending in relation to that consent and what we want done to us. And we have to see that it's a reflection. What we do to others and what we put out in the universe is allowed to be given back to us. So it's amazing that we can then refine ourselves, and what will beam back to us is literally that refinement, that increasing self-awareness and freedom. And consent does seem to be a big deal. They say that the only way it all happened is that At one point or another, they got somebody's consent. Yes, once you get to a certain point where it's happened enough and now you go, oh, this is happening. I'm not a victim. I consented to this, but I don't want this anymore. That's consent. And you can say, I do not consent to this anymore. Now I know what is going on. I did not know before. And that's part of what we probably would have to say is that we didn't know what you were doing before. You deceived us. We do not consent to that deceptive system, the situation, the systems you presented before. We retain our power, and what we go from there, as far as what we do consent to, is up to us. But we have to state that and then live by it. That is apparently a freeing process. The strange thing is, it might be like pulling teeth to get people to do that. It literally might be. We might see these dramas play out, just telling people to take responsibility for living a good, happy life.
Definitely.
In harmony. Happiness is harmony. Goodness is harmony. That's all it means.
And so I'm going to feed it back to you here again, just based off of just the question and then also the response and my own intuition. The idea of consent is that is the kind of hinging piece to, manipulation and giving consent, and it's your own power, it's your own accountability. When you get to a place of turning your consent over, whether it's to a religion, whether it's to a government, whether it's to McDonald's, whatever it is, you're turning over your accountability in that moment to that. And so essentially you're giving consent. And so the opportunity, again, where the dichotomy and both ends of the spectrum are from an internal level of work and then also an external, is that you can say, I don't give consent to the poisoning of humanity, or the killing off of depopulation. I don't give consent to depopulation. But without the understanding of how depopulation is actually being executed in the real world, you may unknowingly be giving consent each day. So the responsibility, again, relies on the inward journey of you understanding on an intellectual, spiritual level what doesn't feel good to you. Depopulation doesn't feel good to me. So what are the ways that depopulation is happening? Okay, it's happening through the manipulation of the food chain. It's happening through vaccines. It's happening through, the medical system. So these are ways that you educate yourself as an individual to take a stand against in the real world. And these become activist topics. These become the outward expression of dialogue with the real world of what's going on. But then it's also, again, for your own inner work. And, this ties so much into exactly how I feel about the movement. It's an inward journey, but it's also an outward journey. The outward information is just as important as the inside one, and it has to be balanced. Does that kind of tie that all together in a way?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, and we got to give accountability. The way they see it, you go somewhere and you buy food, and then you go, oh, well, this has been poisoning me the whole time. The only thing one can say is, did you look at the ingredients? Did you research the company? Did you literally go look and find out what it is? And did anyone pull up and say, yo, eat this food or you're going to die right now?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's all, we did it to ourselves. It's all free will. And then you say, who's doing it?
No.
Oh, my neighbor. He works there. We're doing it to ourselves. And so, and then you got to think, well, oh, no, they said we don't want to talk to you right now. I'm busy, so I can't figure out what's in the meal.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not human nature. If you want to figure something out and there's a tree in the way, you don't just bump into the tree and turn around. You find 1,000 different other ways to do it. That's human nature.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's like the inner and the outer has to harmonize. And doing that, instead of having one line coming out from the center and we go out and we're focused on a object or a screen, a TV, a concept, whatever, or we have one line going in and we have this expanse experience of all these internal emotions and concepts and planes and natures and selves or states of the self. When we combine the two, it's as if we get two orbs connected by a line segment expanding into one that becomes one big orb that expands around us to create our reality. That is what's happening anyway. When we are aware of it, then we can actively utilize this basically like a form of scalar grid. That's just the mind. And it's pretty much the process of bringing the source of the soul of that knowledge here to this realm, looking within and connecting and always making it a balance and harmonizing it. That is like creating a flow. And where we bring it here, Then it comes whether we're going to transmute everything here, or whether we're going to return directly to source, or whether we're going to transmute everything here as we return to source. Either way, it's a harmony with the inner and the outer.
So I think we're coming up on almost 3.5 hours here. What I wanted to ask you at the end of this here is, do you feel that they that are interacting with you and kind of participating with you and sharing this information, do you on your own gut intuitional level trust they?
I put them through my own types of tests, but the whole point is it never got away from the situation, the reality that they're the ones testing me. Although I did test them, and a lot of people cried, and they're people from a space fleet, from secret societies, and maybe it wasn't, necessarily the best way to go about it, but I brought my emotion to it, and I interacted in the way that I thought a human should. Although I was very stubborn and asked for proof, saying, why do I have to tell, blah, 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 even though I know that's always what I always wanted. And so I was basically being spiteful, trying to get them to draw it out, and that almost broke people's limits and hearts and minds, because I was being spiteful through that. And I passed through death 3 times in the result of that. And I saw many things, and again, apparently that was part of the breaking the veils. When we're not afraid of death, eventually it all comes to be known. And so short answer, no. Long answer, yes. It's hard to describe. It's hard to describe. I saw the worst things that could happen to humanity. I also saw how we not necessarily avoid that or do anything in response to that, but how we create what's real and reconnect with the source, reconnect with the soul. And I saw technology that interfaces with the soul and the spirit and can help ascend and bring trauma out and get rid of it from the DNA. It actually corrects the DNA. So if they showed me these things, okay, and to trick me, well, I know all their secrets. Basically, I'm not really telling people stuff that you would consider their secrets. It's basically a bunch of nasty, perverted stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That isn't involved in this. That is the maybe 3rd, 4th layer of dimensional vealing where a spiritual virus infected that. The highest levels have nothing to do with that. Although the process here will not be, again, like forgive and forget and just turn away and get slapped again. We will not go into that repetitive pattern again. Apparently there's not enough allowances in the octave spectrum of the universe of consciousness for that this is literally the unveiling for all of time for humanity. And then again, more than secrets, more than 1 or 2 pieces of technology, they showed me as much technology as I could comprehend, and a couple times I needed to expand my mind to comprehend it. So they can do basically anything, go in and out of time, replicate any object. They can create 3-dimensional objects. They can create 4-dimensional objects and holographic devices, chips, memory pattern constructs, consciousness, basically, informational patterns, and databases and schemes, like realities. Then they have all types of weaponry, scalar weaponry, many things. We were both trained, we were both conditioned, we were both programmed. But everybody involved is also given through this the ability to transmute all of that, to transmute the negative energy, distortions and vibrations. It's not an object, so to speak, that is plaguing humanity. So it's the worst with the best mixed in. And of course, then you go, well, what does that mean? Who do you trust? Whatever. I'm telling you the information that exists, the things that exist, the dimensional layers, without even, the Illuminati. You'll know that the soul and the spirit exist in these things. And now we're going to learn about why the planet is going through this and why civilization is being delayed. And the best is that we ascend through this. The worst is that it just stays the same and everything keeps on going. And possibly, maybe the timeline ends and we're trapped in a a time loop forever. But again, that's, it's up to the person to decide. And so it really can't be, it can't be a trick, basically. I mean, it could be, but part of that trick then is to wake you up out of all your delusions.
Hmm.
Not necessarily you, but people in the world. So then, well, what is that then as a trick? It's a painful, eternal, life-giving trick.
Hmm.
There are no words to really describe the situation.
Do you are you comfortable going into that specific memory about what you were just talking about regarding that you made them all cry? I, do you feel comfortable talking about the specific details of that memory and sharing that?
I do. It's very complex. For instance, the technology they have, you know, they can brief on conversations like this and tell me whether to talk about everybody crying or not 6 years ago before it happens. So yeah, I can. It's not very complicated.
Mm.
I was being very spiteful to the point where they appear to be the people who are harming us the most, when in reality, we're basically being shown things that are automatically harmful because humanity in itself is in such a low state of consciousness and awareness that it's shocking. It shocks the skin off of us. And so for years, and then I was managed, handled, and controlled. And then because of the specific outcomes, if a person goes into fight or flight fear, or even fakes it like I was, then they get handled by the groups, the corporations, the segment of the secret control systems, because the Illuminati is beyond all of that. Although it kind of is that, but it's beyond it. And then you see how nasty it can get, as far as like military control groups and abductions and kidnappings and things like that. And so I blame them for that. Although if I go back and look, they didn't really have anything to do with that. They were just there to watch. And then the parts of them that did have to do with that, in the end, I was given the opportunity to state whether I wanted them to have that power over me or not. And I said no, and so then they no longer have that power. And I live by it. And if I don't, it basically comes back. And so, but basically, it's like, that's what I'm saying. Either they were putting on an A-grade performance, trying to convince me that this is for the salvation of humanity, the salvation of human souls, that we've been here for millions of years, and then, I'm put in a wormhole and I see all millions of years, and it takes like half an hour to come to terms with the situation. And, we're in a device the whole time that's set up by generators, and the streets are blocked off in my town by police closing off the roads in the, 400, 500, 600 yard vicinity. And then ion shields are put up by these plasma generating devices to the point where we disappear in that field. And then we're sucked through a wormhole and we're in another location on the planet. And there's hundreds of people that are popping past the ion shield now, walking out of nowhere. And there's teams of hundreds of people. There are people in craft that have been in the craft. For instance, it was stuff like, and I was going again, like, okay, well, how do I know you're telling the truth? Why don't I just fight you? I'm just going to beat you all up right now, and literally fighting everybody. And then, soldiers come out, all types. I fought all types. That was my thing. And then we're all bloodied up and stuff like that. And of course, there's just a little healing ray or an injection or whatever you need, and all the wounds heal instantly. And I'm going through it more than a human can go through it. So I'm using my hate in a way, my spite, to wear them down, having to handle me. And eventually they're literally like crying, like, stop doing this. Like, we're telling the truth. This is going to help, and it's not even like transhumanist or this, that. It's just the truth. Tell people the truth. We're not faking this stuff. About basically these errors, these mess ups. Oh, we made it to eternity. Whoops. Some of our tech evolved as well, and now it's going to, try and keep everybody in material reality and build false realities around them. And that became the soul trap, And so they're exposing these things to me. Either they're setting up so that people believe that we're souls and we're really spirits beyond that, and we incarnate, and maybe once. But what happens is that we get our memory flashed and this, that, and the other. Or either that, or they showed me, and they took me on a craft to view the process on the moon, where Nazis writing out in a device that's not operated by normal stuff. Souls as they come into the moon, and it's a big facility. And then there's a place, another dimension or something, where there's another race, and there's other humanoid races, and there are beings from the future, apparently Lyrians or something. and they're related to the or so one of them is related to the dolphin consciousness, and they're literally like spiritually awakened humans. Their craft basically float is like a solid ship, like a metal Twinkie, and it looks like it does the worm across space time to you, like a dolphin flipping and spinning in the air, like a flipper or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a big metal ship that's swimming on gravitation waves and is rippling in space time like a sheet flapping in the wind, and that's
Wow.
how it flies. And so I'm seeing all these things, reptilian races, then through the Veals, where it's like, yeah, this is the worst. We're tricking you. This is the worst that could happen. Now
Mm-hmm.
fight your way out of it. And so now I know how to get out of certain situations. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of going on what you asked me before. But I wore them down by pretending, and I wasn't pretending, but I didn't have the confidence to believe that they would do all of this for me, for somebody like me, some guy.
Mm.
And I'm telling you, at the end of it, and here's the thing, it lasted, and then at the end of it, we go home, and it's only about 5 minutes. We were gone, but we were gone for about 3 days,
Mm.
and then on the times where we went through wormholes, it lasted many years.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very strange, very powerful. And again, all the control systems. You type in the Illuminati, and you get all these commissions and institutions and establishments and think tanks and corporations and control systems. Okay, they were all there. They all were there.
Mm.
And so again, well, how do you time didn't fit into that time? We're in an accelerated a field, a gravitation field, if you will, and we experience many, many, many days in these I don't know if they're simulators or if it's another dimension or if it's a place on the earth where they have these generators set up, and it's like you go in and it's time lasts, whatever you want it to be. I do know there's a base. Apparently, it might be somebody just talked about the Bugetsy Mountain, I think, and that if you, anyone that goes down there lives there basically because you have to age regress as you come out. You come back old, like down for 20 minutes and come back, and it'll be in the future, or you'll be old. I can't actually remember. I think you age faster, and so it's pretty crazy. But apparently, there's either generators or that's a natural. And so all these things happened, and I saw how these things work. I saw the people that pull the strings. I saw them. I saw how they interact. I saw the people that went off in UFOs and were just having parties and like these crazy, crazy parties in the sky, and they've been doing it for like a million years, and they're kind of losing their minds from it. So I saw these things, and it looks like they want me to tell because they kind of can't really do it on their own. And there are some of them that they're connected to that are so far gone from these devices and the power that it is up to us to really come together as a species, as a human race.